Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the February 12th meeting of the City of Tampa Variance Review Board. My name is Gary Brown, and I am the chair. From my left, the members of the board are
Michael Villa,
Dustin Pasteur,
Brett Feldman.
Michael DePapa.
also in attendance this evening are Kristen Moore, Assistant City Attorney, and Eileen Rosario and Tawanda Anthony of Land Development Coordination, and Brian Knox of Natural Resource, and from Transportation we have Brian Marsh. I'll take just a few minutes to review tonight's procedures. Cases will be called in the order that they appear on the agenda. When your case number and applicant's name are called, please stand in either aisle to the side of the room to acknowledge that you're here. Staff will then give a brief introduction to the board of each application. When you approach the podium, please speak into the microphone and state your name, address, and if you've been sworn in. The applicant and/or their agent will have 10 minutes to give testimony, present witnesses, and documentation as a part of their presentation. This is your time to present all of your evidence. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support of or in opposition to an application will then be given 3 minutes each. After that, the board may have an opportunity to ask questions regarding the application. Finally, the applicant will have an additional 5 minutes for rebuttal if needed. The time periods as stated will be kept by me, the chair. Any information such as pictures or plans and have not been previously submitted as a part of your petition and you intend to present at this hearing for consideration in support of your petition must be individually presented and accepted by the board. After acceptance by the board, you must submit the item to staff so that it can be entered and made a part of the permanent record. The board bases its decision on competent and substantial evidence which is presented this evening and which meets the criteria required by the city's Code of Ordinances. The variance granted by the board will be only for what is shown on the site plan and will be compliant with any terms and conditions stated in the approval by the board. You must have 4 votes for the variance to be approved. If an insufficient vote is obtained, for instance, you got 3 out of 5 of us, the case shall be automatically carried over for consideration of the board's next meeting. If approved, your variance will expire 2 years from today's date. All other city codes will need to be met. If your case is continued, it will be continued to either March 12th or April 9th, which are the next public hearing dates. If you wish to appeal a variance review board's decision to City Council, you must file a petition for review of a board decision within 10 business days of the decision. If your variance is granted, you will not be able to pull any permits until after the 10-day appeal period has passed. Your cooperation will help ensure that this meeting runs smoothly, and we will greatly appreciate it. We have 14 cases tonight. Before we begin the first case, is there any business regarding the agenda that staff would like to address?
Tawanda Anthony, Land Development. We have 5 cases that need to be continued.
5?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first one is VRB 1874.
Do you want us to make a motion and do this as we go?
I can, if you'd like, we can do it that way, or I can just give you all the cases.
You can recommend to us.
Okay. Well, yes, we can do it that way. The first one, they're requesting to be continued to April. They're still working with Natural Resources in regards to the grand tree removal and coming up with an alternative design.
Okay.
And that would be April 9th.
April 9th, right. Okay. Do we need to make a motion on that, council, or is that?
I was just going item by item, so if you wanted to entertain a motion to continue this to April 9th.
Okay, go ahead. Have a motion to continue to April 9th? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
The next item is VRB 1901, and they have an easement issue with Tico. And we're requesting it be continued to the March 12th public hearing date.
Do I have a motion to move it to the March meeting?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? Okay.
The next one is VRB 1922,
Okay.
and we're asking that it also be continued until the March 12th hearing date.
Do I have a motion to continue it to March 12th? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, the next item is VRB 1925.
Did you say 25?
Yes,
Okay.
and this is a grand tree that's, it's a wetland setback issue, and it's still being reviewed by Natural Resources, and they're asking for the April 9th hearing date.
Have you heard on that item, Mr. Chairman?
I guess so, sure.
My name is John Grandoff, Suite 3700 Bank of America Plaza, and I represent the applicant on item 19-25. We're prepared to go forward this evening. The site plan clearly shows the top of the bank, which is the extent of the wetlands, and we have a letter from an environmental consultant confirming the location of the top of the bank, so there's no reason to postpone this hearing at this time. We want to go forward.
Okay. Counsel, can you assist us here?
It is my understanding that there was not a recommendation from Natural Resources staff, and this is a reduction of wetland setback, which our code requires a recommendation, a written recommendation from Natural Resources staff. If that is the case, and I don't know if Mr. Knox can address that, but if that is the case, the application is insufficient and cannot be heard yet.
So that's not my problem, that the Natural Resources staff didn't review the application and give their report.
It's an application requirement.
Well, where have they been since I filed the application?
It's required to come with the application. So until that is in there, the application is not actually sufficient.
When are they going to prepare that report?
I do not know if Mr. Knox has an answer to that at this point.
Please come forward.
Brian Knox, Natural Resources. So part of the application requirement is an application from us along with an application from EPC. And so the line needs to be formally delineated from EPC, which it was not. And so because of that, we feel like this application is insufficient.
Okay. Is there a motion to continue this case to April 9th? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
And I will follow up with you, Mr. Grandoff, and make sure we get your application correctly, but at least you won't need to renotice.
I won't need to what?
You will not need to renotice since it's been continued on the record, so
Right.
at least
Well,
we have that.
I have a conflict on April 9th. Going to have to be probably May.
Okay. So
Because
May-
the Natural Resources did not provide their report. So my client's going to get delayed from February to May. I want that clearly understood.
so the May 14th would be the May VRB date.
I guess that's the one.
Okay.
All right, we need to amend that then. Is there a motion to move it to the May, what was it, 14th?
May 14th.
May 14th? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay.
I just want to urge the staff to please move forward as soon as possible to conduct a review. Thank you.
I would love for the staff to do their job as long as they have all of the information that's required, counsel. Okay?
And the last item is VRB 1932. And we're asking that case be continued to the March 12th hearing date.
Just for the record, what was the reason? Or is there one?
This application, they incorrectly noticed for the February hearing, and they're on their March cycle.
Can you tell us how many we have on March now?
We will have, when I came in, we had 9 cases. With the continuations,
I think we only moved 2 or 3. 3 to March, so we're at 12, which would be 13. Is there a motion to move to March? Oh,
there'll be
excuse me,
12 total.
Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, so moved. All in favor, say aye. Aye? No opposed, okay. Move to March. Council, do you want to go ahead and prep everybody on the vote tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Audience members, more specifically applicants, the Variance Review Board only has 5 members tonight. 4 votes are required in order for a variance to be granted. If anyone would like to request a continuance, it is not a matter of right, but an applicant may request a continuance until there is a full board of the VRB. So you could request a continuance to another VRB date at this time. If you would like to request it, if you know that you would like to request a continuance, you may request it now. You may also request it at the beginning of your application in case another board member were to happen to join us. But you need to make the request at the beginning of your hearing before evidence is presented in order to be considered for a continuance based on the number of board members that we have tonight. At this time, is there anyone that would like to go ahead and request a continuance to until there is a full board?
Again, you've got to have 4 votes to get approved. Okay, seeing none, we will move on. With no further business to discuss, is there a motion to approve last December's minutes without objection? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, is there a motion to approve last month's minutes without objection? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All right. I will now ask Ms. Moore to address the board regarding ex parte communications.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask members of the board if you've had any ex parte communications regarding any of the matters coming before you this evening. If you've had any verbal communications, I would ask you to disclose the sum and substance of that communication, when and where it occurred, and with whom it occurred. And if you've received any written communications, I would ask you to disclose the nature of it and to file it in the record. I see none.
Okay, at this time, all persons who are presenting evidence or testimony to the board shall rise and be sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Bendito. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're going to call the first case, BRB 18-108.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, this is application number VRB 18108. The property address is 5003 West Cleveland Street. The VRB should be authorized to grant variances. Excuse me. I apologize for that. Per section 27-156, the applicant is seeking to reduce the west side yard from 7 feet to 1 foot to construct a roof enclosure over a permitted outdoor kitchen area, and there's currently a building permit open for this. The property is zoned R75 and was purchased in 2017. The house was built in 2012. The property received a variance to reduce the pool setback from 5 feet to 2.9 feet and the pool enclosure from 5 feet to 2.3 feet on the west side yard as well. Here's a photo showing what they're proposing. So this is the roof enclosure that is being requested. Here's the site plan. This is the outdoor kitchen area as it exists, and this is the enclosed area that they're requesting. And this is at the 1 foot setback. Are there any questions from staff?
My name is Kevin Curtis. Kevin Curtis, 8380 Ulmerton Road, Suite 320. I've been sworn in. We're looking to put a elite roof over the existing screen enclosure. Like you said, the setback was 5 feet to 2.3. We're just looking to put a cap on top of the screen roof that's already there. So it would make it a screen roof to, of course, an enclosed roof.
Is that your presentation?
Pretty much.
Well, you are required to give us some hardships, so we need to address that.
Okay. It's my first variance, so.
Yeah. We won't bite.
In order to receive a variance, you will need to demonstrate what there is about the property or the structure that creates a hardship or a practical difficulty where you could not build the structure within the setbacks. So if you could address that for the board, that would be very helpful.
Meaning that it's not going to affect the neighbors from rain downfall or any effects to the property around it.
Is there something unusual about your property, about the size, the layout?
No, I mean, it's just pretty much wanting to cover up the kitchen so they can cook at night, I mean, it doesn't affect the neighbors. Their fence line is, I'd say, approximately 2.5 feet from where we want to put this enclosure. Or the enclosure's already there, but to put the roof, so it wouldn't affect them. I really don't know.
With the way the house is laid out, is this the only place that you could put it?
Yeah, because they want it over the outdoor kitchen.
Yeah, does any of the board members have any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
Well, I think maybe by asking you some questions, we can get kind of what we're looking for as far as the hardship. So I noticed that perhaps, I'm not sure, you're not the resident, right? Are you the
No, I'm the applicant. I'm actually the project manager on this project.
Okay. So this property apparently had received a setback when the pool was built, which I think is 2-point-something feet. So I'm just wondering why you couldn't just go out to where the new set, or the old setback was at 2.3 feet.
Well, we'd
rather than
actually
go
want
all the way out.
That's what we'd want to do. When I went to the zoning department, they're the one who told me that I should go from the 7 foot to the 1 foot when I spoke to the zoning department of Tampa.
All right, so I'm kind of confused as to, so that particular side yard is not the side yard then that was originally subject to a variance before? Is that right? Or do you
I
know?
believe it is because the screen enclosure as well as the pool is on that side of the house. So where this roof would be follow in line with the pool.
Mr. Feldman?
Are there going to be any eaves and gutters on the roof?
No, it's just going to be flush with the screen enclosure that's already currently there.
Okay. Mr. Villa asked you your relationship to the owner. You're their agent? You're here with their authority this evening?
Yes.
Is the owner here as well?
No.
Okay. So if you could build up into the, where the existing setback is, do you know if that existing setback is actually 2 point, whatever was previously approved, or is it built to 1 foot?
No, it's built to the 2 point, I believe the 2.3 for the pool enclosure. So we'd just be putting a cap on top of that.
Well, if that's the case, I don't see why they need a variance.
Yeah, well, let's
Yeah.
be sure that you're done with your presentation, because we have to see if there's anybody that wants to speak on it or against
That's all I
this.
really have.
Is that all you have? Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the board for questions. Counsel, can you answer Mr. Feldman's question about if they already have a 2.9 approved variance for the screen and they're not changing that?
Is it true that screen enclosures have different setback requirements than a covered structure?
Ms. Anthony, if you could address that, please. Thank you.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, that is correct. That's why they're here before us tonight. They reduced the setback initially from 5 feet to 2.9 and 5 feet to 2.3, and now they're before us to reduce that side setback from 7 feet to 1 because they're putting in a hard roof.
Okay, but it sounds like we're hearing testimony, they're only actually going to go to 2.9.
Well, they like to amend the request to 2.9. We
They
can do that tonight.
Okay, all right. But they did notice to 1 foot?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Before we entertain that, I just will say for me that I'm not inclined to support this. I don't see the hardship. It's a 75-foot wide lot, which is larger than normal. They already requested the variance previously. Why not have just done this at that time? It does potentially affect the neighbor because we're creating water runoff much closer to their property line than a screen enclosure provides. And as always, I'm concerned about fire separation. I don't know what's on the other side of that fence or how close the roof structure is on that side, but the closer we get, the more potential for spread of fire. So without any hardship at all submitted to us, I won't support it.
Okay, well, we haven't closed the public hearing. You can ask those questions of the applicant, or if the applicant, No, we haven't. Well, excuse me, I meant board. If I said that, I meant board questions. Yeah, because he hasn't had his rebuttal yet. Can you speak to the issue that was just raised about potential impacts to the neighbor?
I can see maybe if we were to go to the 1 foot, there may be an issue with water runoff, but seeing how we're only going to the 2.3 to the original setback of the pool enclosure, there's still a good 1.5 to 3 feet of space of where the neighbor's fence is. So it wouldn't affect the neighbors. As for fire or anything of that nature, I don't think they would have let us permit or put the grill where we did, within a certain amount of feet.
The purpose of a variance is to allow you to do things that the code does not permit. So by getting a variance, you were allowed to put things closer to the property line than normally you would be. So when you say they wouldn't let us do something that maybe was detrimental, this board is the one that's letting people do those things. And so it's up to us to determine whether or not something could be detrimental. So the kitchen is one issue, but which is not before us now because it's already there and presumably was approved by the building department. But this roof structure is, and I haven't heard a hardship in any regard. There's 5 criteria on the application that are spelled out, and I haven't heard a response to any of the 5. So we're bound to respond to the hardship of the property or the building, and I haven't heard anything that addresses that.
Ms. Anthony, if they were only to build to 2.3 feet, do they still require a variance to the 1 foot? If they were only to build to 2.3 feet from the property line where they had a a prior variance.
Correct, they would still need to request a variance.
Okay, and that's because they're changing the site plan that was previously submitted?
That's because they are now considered, it's part of the primary structure. It's
Okay.
attached to the primary structure, and they have to meet the side setback requirements.
Okay. So, all right, that makes sense. So, I mean, hypothetically, well, I'll save this for board
Okay,
discussion.
all right, yeah, you can save it up. My only question is, I'm looking at the sketch in our package of the outdoor kitchen. Was it built like this sketch? It appears.
Yes.
Pardon?
It was built to sketch.
Okay, so the actual grill countertop cabinet is pushed in away from the side property line by a few feet?
Correct. Well,
So-
there's a good amount. I mean, between where the kitchen sits and where the setback is, I'd say there's about 8 feet.
And when you say setback, we're talking about the screen.
Yes.
So there's 8 feet from the screen, which is at about 2.3 feet off the property
There's
line.
about 5 feet from the screen.
About 5 feet to the actual cabinet grill.
Yes.
Okay, I just want everybody to understand the physics. Okay, if that, does that complete your rebuttal and
Yes,
and
sir.
your presentation? Okay, thank you, all right. Now I will move to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion? I mean, without objection, I will move to close the public hearing. Now we're in board discussion. Anybody want to add anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So, just generally, I would be okay with them covering up the grill, but that wouldn't give them, that wouldn't go deeper into the setback than is already there. So I would approve something that would permit a roof that would reach over where the grill and countertop is, but doesn't go any deeper than that. If the applicant were agreeable to that, I guess we could just approve, council, can we just approve less, even though we're, that may modify their site plan to some degree?
So the applicant can make changes to the site plan to reflect something that's, that has changed, and from a notice perspective, you would certainly be able to approve a lesser variance than what was requested. I think the applicant verbally amended his application to 2.9. If the board felt a further reduction in the requested setback reduction was necessary, it might be appropriate to address the applicant.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to make a motion to open the public hearing?
Wait, let's do a little math.
Okay.
The plan he's showing here says it's an 8-foot overhang, and he claims that's only going to the 2.9 or 2.3? 2.3. So that means that it is 5 feet, the 8 feet is projecting 5 feet over the allowable setback. So to Brett's point, you could do 3 feet conceivably without any variance at all, if the dimensions on this plan are right.
Does that cover where the grill is?
I don't know, we're getting kind of verbal estimates of how far the grill is.
Yeah,
but
we can't offer testimony here since we don't know for sure. The
It
only
sounds
thing
like-
I would say about this whole idea is that from a practical use standpoint, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense just to cover the grill, because the intent of covering it would be to stay dry in a rainstorm, and if it's raining, it kind of defeats the purpose. So I don't know that that would achieve what the applicant wants, or wants out of the use. So I think that because of the size and scale of this, it's either gonna be approved or it's not. And yes, reduced to the 2.9 feet, because it doesn't sound, there wasn't any testimony that they want to move the screen, okay? So,
Well, and so your point is a solid one, and unfortunately, I have to agree with Mr. Pastor that I didn't hear a lick of testimony about a hardship that would permit me to approve what they're asking. So,
Any other comments? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that variance request for case VRB 18-108 for the property located at 5003 West Cleveland Street for a reduction in the side yard from 7 feet to 1 feet with encroachment of eaves and gutters be denied due to the failure of the petitioner to meet its burden of proof to provide competent and substantial evidence in the record at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 2780 of the city code. Specifically that no hardships were referenced.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
All right, motion made by Mr. Pastor, seconded by Mr. Feldman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It failed, or I mean, it was denied, excuse me, 5 to nothing. You have 10 days to appeal to City Council. Next case. VRB 18-15.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, application number VRB 18115. The property address is 709 West Plymouth Street. Per section 27156, the applicant is seeking to reduce the east side yard from 7 feet to 3 feet. There is also a request for a rear yard setback, but that's not before you tonight. They are going to apply for a design exception, and that will be approved administratively and reviewed by zoning. So in-house, that will be taken care of. So they are here to construct a single-family residence and preserve the 37-inch grand oak tree. The property is zoned RS50 and was purchased in 2018. The property is currently under review for construction of the new single-family detached dwelling. Natural Resources has reviewed the above referenced variance with respect to landscaping and tree removal, and the applicant has found it consistent because the applicant has decided to provide an alternative design to save the grand tree. Here's an aerial. Here's the property, West Plymouth, North Boulevard. MLK is to the north. Here's a photo of the property. Here's another photo of the property. Here's a photo showing the tree that's being preserved. Here's a close-up also showing the tree, 37-inch oak. And this is the design that's being proposed. They've moved the house over, and here they're requesting the side yard reduction from 7 feet to 3 feet in order to preserve the grand oak. Any questions from staff?
See none. Applicant, please come forward, state your name and address, and if you've been sworn.
Good evening, good evening, board members. Joe Gibbons, Gulf Bay Builders, 5020 North Coolidge Avenue, Building 1, Suite E, Tampa, 33614. I am the applicant for the project. I'm used to having an easel here for other presentations, so if you don't mind, I can have Jessica help me with.
You have your human easel.
Sir, if you could just state whether you've been sworn for the record.
Yes, I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
So we're requesting a east side yard setback reduction from 7 feet to 3 feet to preserve this 37-inch oak tree. I have met with Natural Resources staff on a couple different occasions out there, and I also engaged the services of a private arborist that not only deemed the tree to be preservation quality, but in addition, we did some air spading along the east side of the tree, and we were able to find out exactly where the root system was, and so we're requesting to move the home over to preserve this tree. So what we've done is modified the foundation to do a floating slab, and this circle here demonstrates the 20-foot setback from the grand tree. So this entire area, this entire area here will be a suspended floor to preserve the root system. And as I stated earlier, we did a air spading, and we determined where there were some significant roots, and so we've designed the floating slab around that root system. And so this is it's always been a two-lot parcel, and we purchased this property back in 2018. And the tree in question is this 37-inch oak here, where the original driveway for the previous structure actually butted right up to the tree. And you can kind of see it right here. In fact, this van was parked practically on the tree. So we demoed this house, and we have since constructed a home on 707 West Plymouth. This is the tree in question here. So we've moved the home over approximately about 10 feet from the center line of the trunk to preserve the root system. Here's another picture with it a little bit more close up. So, in stating the hardship, as I've mentioned, we had an independent arborist as well as the city staff arborist review the tree and determine that it's definitely preservation quality. So we've designed the structure to preserve that tree with the floating slab.
Does that complete your presentation?
You have 14 other cases. I want to give you enough time for the others.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any questions from the board? No, I'm just any questions of the applicant. I'm just, okay. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak in either for or in opposition? If so, please come forward.
Good evening. James Cunningham, 707 West Plymouth. I did swear in. Am I allowed to provide any, sorry, this is my first time coming to a board meeting like this. Am I allowed to provide any pictures on my behalf from my side?
Absolutely.
So I am the adjacent neighbor. And I guess my only concern is just that it coming from 7 feet to 3 feet would pretty much inhibit the side of my yard as well as privacy. We have our air conditioners right on that side, which my fear is that would get swamped with enough water, as well as our foundation is something that would be of concern for me with the extra water being dumped onto that area. The other side of my property has a home that's already within about 3 feet, so this would also encroach the size of both sides of my yard. Here's another angle. And so this is from the east side all the way. So that's already what I have going on right there. So this side is the west side currently right now. And this is just to kind of demonstrate this little PVC tube would indicate where that house would be placed, right next to my house. Our air conditioners are right over this fence line right here. So my main fear is just that there would be some off spray from the water from the roof coming onto my air conditioners. And that would completely affect their ability to work properly. Here's another close-up of that. We have discussed with the neighbors that currently live adjacent at 711 West Plymouth. They are renters, and they have indicated that they are not very big fans of the tree, nor is the owner of the property, that it has affected the roots have affected their driveway at this point. I'm not here to say no to cutting down trees or anything like that. I understand the beauty of them and everything, and how important it is to have that in a neighborhood. However, I would just appreciate considering our situation, and that's all I have.
Sir, would you, if those are extra copies, could you submit those for the record?
Yeah, I'll leave them here for you if you want.
Thank you, sir.
Where do I leave them?
You can hand them to
Okay.
Mr. Rosario or myself.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak on this application? Please state your name, address,
Yes,
and if you've been sworn.
my name is Alan Dobbs. I live at 5111 North Swanee Avenue, and I have been sworn. Gulf Bay, they do a lot of really nice homes in Seminole Heights, Riverside Heights, but I have a couple questions about the petition. Typically, when you split a lot, you have to get an approval for it because they want to make sure that you're not going to create any non-conforming conditions. So it seems like this tree being there and not being able to build around the tree would be a non-conforming condition. So, so that's one concern I have. And then, I'm sorry, I forgot the other one. But that's the main thing, is that the tree, like the previous person said, it is a grand tree and there's a procedure for taking it out. And I know he had a certified arborist, look at it and said it's preservation quality. But again, I'd like to go back to the fact that there are means to take a tree like that out with proper noticing and hardships. But I just would be curious from land development how they got approval to split the lot, knowing that they would have to get a variance like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbs. Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak? All right, board, do you have any questions for anybody?
Just wanted to ask the applicant, is this a one-story house, and how many square feet is it?
Yes, it is a one-story home, and it's approximately just under 1,800 square feet. And to address a couple of the questions brought to you earlier, the property was always platted as 2 lots. It was always a double lot. We simply just had to apply for a separate folio number. This particular lot, I believe, is lot 4, I think, in the lot to the east. There's lot 3, but it's always been platted as two lots. As far as the water runoff, you show on the.
Mr. Gibbons, before you get into rebuttal, let us get through our questions.
Sure.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Well, I was going to ask, were you planning to put a gutter on that side?
Yes, that was my next. We plan on putting gutters and downspouts on the entire structure, along with ADS pipe with bubblers going out to the right-of-way on both sides.
Okay. Any other questions? I've got one for Mr. Knox. Looking at the tree evaluation report, and correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see the arborist report. The city's reports only says 37-inch GT. It doesn't really talk about the condition of the tree, the type of tree, et cetera. Can you expand on that, please?
All right. Let's see.
And while you're doing that, I'm gonna follow up with Mr. Gibbons when he's done. I wanna know what the cost of the construction detail is to do a floating slab. And while you're doing that, Mr. Mims, I'm also gonna ask you, if the tree were removed, what would the mitigation requirement be?
Okay, I'll start with that one. Since it's a 37-inch grand tree, it would be inch-for-inch replacements. That roughly boils down to about 19 2-inch trees that you would have to put back on the lot if you were not to mitigate.
Okay.
So from Natural Resources recommendation, we would recommend that there would be a combination of tree planting and paying into the tree trust fund.
Okay. So the tree trust fund, if they were to pay 18 trees, would be how much?
Let's see,
Be $300 a tree?
$300 a tree. So.
Okay.
Sorry, my math's a little shaky. So let's see.
5,600?
56.
Somebody have that number? Okay. Plus the cost of removing the tree if it were approved.
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right. And
It's
the condition of the tree, do you know what it is?
The condition of the tree was rated as a B8
Okay.
on the arborist report by our arborist, David Riley. That was from an initial inspection that occurred in September of last year.
Okay. And do you know if the tree has been trimmed since then?
It has not been trimmed since this evaluation, no, sir.
Because there would have been a permit required for that.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, those are my questions for you.
Mr. Knox.
Oh, Mr. Go ahead.
On the tree evaluation report, it says the species is LI. What is that?
That is our abbreviation for live oak.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gibbons, I'm curious, what is the cost to do that slab differently than standard construction?
Due to the fact that when we did our air spading, some of the roots were a little bit higher, which means we would have to do that portion on a stem wall. That area is probably about $15,000.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, you see the value in saving the tree, keeping the tree, and spending the $15,000.
Due to the fact that the city arborist deemed it to be preservation quality, as well as our own independent arborist deemed it to be preservation quality. This would be the third one I've done in the city in the last 12 months to save the tree.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? You can have your rebuttal now, 5 minutes.
Well, as we stated, the home will have gutters and downspouts with bubblers to take all of the water off the entire structure out to the right-of-way. I have brought with me I do have that I can enter to City Council 3 letters in support from one neighbor is directly behind the site, and a couple are from the neighborhood. I'd like to just share real quickly with the board some of our recent projects within the Riverside Heights neighborhood. This was a home that was located at 1008 West Kentucky. The home had been sitting vacant for about 5 years. We purchased it and then subsequently built this home. There was a grand tree in the back that we preserved. This is one at 1007 West Kentucky, and I apologize. This is the front of the home, and this is another home that had sat vacant for about 6 years. We purchased it and then built this home. There's a grand tree in the back that we were able to preserve. This is at 1011 and 1013 West Ohio. Again, it was always platted as 2 lots, and we purchased it and then built 2 structures. This is at 1013 West Ohio. You can see there's a tree in the back that we preserved. And then this is at 1011 West Ohio, and this is the tree next door that we preserved. This is at 3504 and 3506 North Ridge that we're actually in the process of finishing up right now. Again, this was always 2 lots. This is the home at 3506 North Ridge, and we've taken a lot of steps to preserve this tree out front. We've actually designed the entire structure around this tree. And then this was the home. This is just another view of the tree that we preserved. And then this is the home next door at 3504 North Ridge, which ironically is the same home that would be built on 709 West Plymouth. Very similar.
Does that complete your rebuttal?
Yes.
All right, I'll move to, oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
First, I want to say it's nice to see a series of single-story homes. It's very rare that we ever see those presented here, hardly ever, really. But my question is, the fence or proposed fence on the side with the setback reduction, what's the height of that fence going to be?
I'm sorry, what?
The fence on the side of the setback reduction,
Mm-hmm.
what is the height of the fence going to be between the neighbor?
6 feet.
6 feet. What is the height of the top of window on that side of the house, roughly?
Probably 9 feet.
Okay. So there's potential for 3 feet of window that could stick above the height of that fence.
Those windows are what we call knockout windows. They're 2 foot by 2 foot that are set up above, just kind of let the light in.
Kind of like a clear story, faux clear story type of up near
Yes.
the roof line?
Mhm.
Okay.
I
So you're saying
can
that
show you.
the sill height of those windows is going to be above normal eye level? Oh, I see it.
It would be these windows here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
And those are fixed glass windows.
All right, does that complete the rebuttal? I guess so. Okay, motion to move to close the public hearing without objection? All right, we're in board discussion. Anybody have anything to say, or do you want to make a motion?
I just want to say that I applaud the design to save the tree. I understand the protests of the neighbors, and we're very sensitive to neighbors that are immediately next to properties that are asking for variances, but at the same time, the trees belong to the whole neighborhood, even if they're in somebody's yard. And a live oak can live to be hundreds of years old. And so this designer, whoever it was, went through a lot of effort to save this tree that could potentially be in this neighborhood long after this house is gone. And it's very rare that we see people put that kind of effort and are willing to put that kind of money into making that happen. It's quite the opposite. Usually we are here with people finding, to trying to take those trees down. So I like the effort that was put in. I think it's unfortunate that it does have to push it closer to a neighbor, but the issues that were brought up were water runoff, which he's testified will have a full-length gutter, and then privacy. Most times, privacy is when a two-story house is going next to a single story. This is the reverse, which is interesting, but still a concern. And that's why I asked about the fence height at 6 feet. The windows are up to 9 feet, but as we could see on the elevation, I wish the audience could have seen as well, those are high windows. So there's not really an opportunity for somebody to be standing at that window peering over the fence, especially since average view height's around 5 feet eye level. So I think, I'll support the variance because it saves a very nice tree that benefits that neighborhood.
Any other comments? The only comment that I'm going to make is that I applaud the builder for wanting to invest in a structural foundation system that will allow the root system to mature so that tree can get really large and old. But I would question the common sense of trying to keep a tree and allow it to get that large and that big, because it doesn't look very big right now. But if the intent of saving a grand tree is to allow it to mature and canopy and get bigger, I would think that at some point, a future property owner might say, you know what, this is endangering my investment, my house, be trimming on that tree to some extent, and I think that ultimately that tree's gonna lose. So, you know, the tree ordinance does work in those cases where it does require a lot of mitigation, a lot of planning today, if it were to come out. 30, 40 years down the road, if all those trees survived, you'd have 19 grand trees and not one in a bad place. So it's a great tree, it's kind of in the wrong place, that's my opinion. But we're here to talk about hardships, and I'm not gonna open this up for public discussion again, but going forward, I'd like to have council help us in understanding when is a tree a hardship and when is it not a hardship. Because trees are everywhere, you know, trees are, this is not unique or singular to the property at all. But the tree code is there to help preserve and protect large trees. So I get that part of the code. We hear the phrase right tree, right place a lot. And so my only question, and I think the builder's done a good job to help that tree, okay, with the foundation revision. Without the foundation revisions, I would question the concept of trying to keep the tree and build that close and impact the neighbor that much. So anyway, those are my comments.
I just wanted to touch on the tree specifically. You know, had this not been a live oak and say a laurel oak or maybe a different species, I think we'd be having a different conversation here. That live oak is, 60 to 100 years old, has a lot of life left in it. It can take, they've already done some air spading. They could do quite a bit of work to it, whether it be trimming or root work. It's still going to survive. So I just, had this been a different species of tree, I think that we'd be having a different discussion, but because it's a live oak, I got to applaud the builder and the designer.
Okay. So everyone make a motion?
Sure. All right. I move that the variance request for case VRB 18-115 for property located at 709 West Plymouth Street be granted as depicted on the site plan presented at public hearing to reduce the east side yard setback from 7 feet to 3 feet with an encroachment for eaves and gutters based upon the applicant presenting competent and substantial evidence in the record and at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship and practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 27-80 of the city code. Specifically that the builder had due diligence in making an alternative design and preservation efforts both on the house itself and the tree. And in doing so is going to save a 37-inch live oak tree.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, you passed 5-0. You were approved.
Board members, before we move on to the next item, going back to the earlier continuance of VRB 1925, I've had a request to reconsider, instead of moving that to the May hearing, to move it to the April 9th hearing. There is someone available to cover it. I would ask the board to please entertain that motion.
All righty, would somebody like to make that motion?
Propose to amend my original continuance to April 9th.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Okay, next case, VRB 18-116. If the applicant's here, please stand off to the side.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development. This is application number VRB 18-116. The property address is 22.5 Hamilton Heath Drive. The applicant is seeking to decrease the required setback for the wetland from 25 feet to 18 feet for the construction of a pool. That's a 7-foot encroachment into the wetland setback. Per section 27286B, wetland protection and buffer impacts to wetlands associated with adjacent upland activities such as development shall not be considered adverse if appropriate erosion control and if buffers with a minimum width of 15 feet and an average width of 25 feet is provided. So they're encroaching within that 25-foot required setback. And that's the request before us. Natural Resources found the request consistent, but they did have a condition to accompany the request. Here's the aerial of the site. Here's the property. They're located in the Seminole Heights Overlay District. Here's a photo of the dwelling. Here's a photo facing west. Here's a photo facing east. Here's another photo of the property. And you can see it's adjacent to a park. Here's the site plan. What we see here is 17 feet is to the edge of the deck. They're requesting 18 feet and it's to the pool's edge. And that's what's before us. Natural Resources is conditionally approving the deck encroachment, and they have conditioned that they have to provide pervious pavers in the area that's encroaching into the setback. And Natural Resources is here to elaborate on that.
Okay.
Any questions?
Anybody got any questions? Okay, nope. Applicant, please come forward, state your name, address, and that you've been sworn in.
Hello, my name is Tessa Shiver. I live at 22.5 Hamilton Heath Drive, Tampa, Florida 33604, and I've been sworn in.
Okay.
So we are looking to reduce the wetland setback from 25 feet to 18 feet at the shortest distance from the wetland setback for a swimming pool on the Hillsborough River. Our hardships are that when we first moved into the home, the pool was so important to us that we had the house actually pulled up to the furthest point to the street that was possible in order not to have any encroachment issues at all. We love our yard, we love the nature, we did not want to mess with any of that. Secondly, when we went to our pool company, we had the initial drawing here, and we had it literally was going to be built right up against the foundation of our home. And then the reason that the pool looks so wonky is because it was actually riding along the line of the wetland setback as to not encroach at all. We went ahead and we paid our deposit on this drawing, and about a day later we got a call from the pool company. They did not feel comfortable building up against our foundation, so therefore we had to come and get a variance from y'all. Thirdly, when we came to see Kathy and Brian, Kathy told me that our survey that we used to build the home, we've only been in our home a year in October, was old, and so we had to get a new one. We lost about 9 feet on our wetland setback between the old one and the new one, and I have that here. So this would be the old EPC line. So you see the top of the bank there, and the old EPC line was about 9 feet over to the side of the bank. When we had it redone, our new EPC line, it's right at the top of the bank. And the reason that we lost that 9 feet was because we have these two gorgeous ferns that are growing, that have grown since we took the first survey and the second survey. And apparently, not only are they beautiful, but they're also good for erosion control. So that's why we lost that 9 feet there. So those are our hardships. I do have a biological integrity of hydrology. I know y'all have it in your packet. I can read it to you. We are using a state-of-the-art system for our pool. It is, the water's kept clean by silver ions and natural minerals. So it still does use some chlorine, but it's about 1/100th of normal regular systems. We also are going to take care of those ferns, and we don't have any grass or any type of plants. We have a zero-scape yard, so we don't use any water for that, and there will be no fertilizers used anywhere near the river at all in our case. I also was told that it would be good to tell y'all that we have a plan with Brian and Kathy to mitigate our usage or our encroachment, and we'll have a plan at permitting for restoration plan, which will be in place at permitting.
Does that conclude your presentation?
I think so. It's my first time, so if I missed anything, please tell me.
Okay, we're going to ask if there's anybody in the audience, and then we may have some questions for you. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none. Our board, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
I have a question. Can you explain the two, where you had the resurvey and the line moved? I didn't understand where it was and where it went.
Sure. So when we built our home, we had the first survey done, and we already had the wetland line drawn. And this was done, I believe, in 17. Yeah, 8/29/17. I don't know if you can see that. So the top of the bank is there, and then you can see the EPC line goes down over the top of the bank. And I'm sorry?
Point on the plan.
Oh, sure, right here.
EPC line.
So here's the top of the bank, right here, running along here. This is the old EPC line. And then this is the river here. So the old EPC line came down like this, and this is approximately like 9 feet at the biggest portion of it. So when we had the new one drawn, because of those ferns, she wanted those to be protected. So she just ran the new line right at the top of the bank. So actually the 18 feet that we're asking for is at the shortest distance. So that would be right here where A2 is. And A2 to where the pool will be is the 17 feet. Everything else is far more.
Everybody understand? Okay, all right. My question, you talked a little bit about the restoration that you and Natural Resources, can you kind of point to the site plan and explain where and what you're going to be doing?
We haven't made that plan yet, but I've been told that we will be using wetlands, native flora and fauna, and we'll have a little section of our yard that we'll discuss before permitting, I suppose.
Do you have any photographs of the edge of the river, this area that we're talking about?
I do, but they're in y'all's file. I did not bring them with me. I'm so sorry.
They're not coming up in my file.
Here we go.
Okay, this is the militia.
No,
Just from the side here, kind of point to them where the river is. I don't need this one.
Okay, so, all right, so here, this is that dual camphor tree that they show right here in A2. That's that camphor tree right there, and right off of this is the river right here. And there's those ferns, that's the one fern right there. And then here is another close up.
Upside down.
Yep, sorry. And you can see the river clearly there. So our old EPC line was beyond those ferns, towards the river, towards the water.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question from Ms. Anthony. Could you please explain the 15 feet and the 25 feet in the code and what the difference is and what that means exactly?
So this is on the site plan, the 25-foot line is here. This is the old survey, and you have a copy of the new one.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then that would be the line to,
Can you zoom that out a
Slide
little
that
bit?
up a little bit or zoom it out.
let me see if I can. So this would be the line here. So this would be the,
Top of the bank.
yeah,
That's-
that's the top of the bank. Let me see if I can, yeah, so that may help. But on the old survey, it's the one where it shows both the 15-foot. So you see the 25-foot average setback, and you see the 15 is the minimum. And then what they're requesting here is to reduce the setback from the 25.
To 17.
But they're
They
not touching,
have
they're not
17,
going into
but
the
they're-
15, correct?
Well, they're requesting to go from the 25-foot to the, and they're going down to 18. So the 15-foot is here, and this is the minimum line, and they're probably about, they're in here.
Right,
they're
so
not
the rule,
quite at
the
that
rule is
15.
thou shalt never go closer than 15. But you might be able to go less than 25 depending on circumstances.
Correct. And they may be encroaching within the 15 with some of the pavers, and that's where they're working with natural resources. And that's the conditions with, that they've been approved with conditions.
Oh, okay.
But what determines the average line? Is that the average across the width of their site, or is that the average down a certain length of the riverbank?
And I'll let them speak more to that.
But I mean, the 25 average setback line is an average of what?
Well, it's, excuse me, Brian Knox, Natural Resources. I'm sorry. It's not necessarily an average. It's just from the EPC wetland line. The jurisdictional line is 25 feet from that, and that's all. And the 15 feet is, basically, that's the part where you cannot encroach. You have allowable uses that are within the 25 feet that you are allowed to encroach.
Oh,
But the
okay.
15 feet, it gets a little bit more restricted.
What kind of uses are allowable? Do you know?
In the 15-foot
In
buffer?
the 25-foot line?
And 25-foot pavers, decks, that sort of stuff. So if you got a boat ramp or something like that.
Okay, so I guess my question is, if they're not crossing the 15-foot line, and they are within the 25-foot line, what is the variance for? If the 25-foot line has allowable uses?
Well, it has
Is pool not one of
allowable-
those?
It has allowable uses with respect to the variance. So if you're asking for it,
Okay,
that's the allowance.
got it.
So.
Okay, any other questions from the board? All right, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
I don't think I have anything to rebut.
Okay, that's your right. All right, I move to close the public hearing without objection. Board members, discussion or motion? I'll start with discussion. I don't see any harm being done here. Based on the photographs of the existing condition, and I think the applicant has shown a willingness to work with natural resources, and even though they don't have a plan to show us tonight, I feel confident that they're going to work towards something that's going to benefit the edge of the river in terms of vegetation and wildlife, because I know natural resources is going to make that happen. So I don't see any problem with this.
More importantly, to your point, I agree with it, but more importantly, I feel like there is a hardship because of that, we'll call it the moving target of the EPC line and the protection of foliage that's out there. So I can support it because there's hardship, because they're making accommodations, and it's not impacting anything much.
Mr. Prosser?
And they're not crossing the already established minimum setback line. So it sounds like this is, from what I could understand from what was just described to me, this was set up that if things are closer than 25 feet, they must be discussed. But if they don't cross the 15 feet, then they're presumed allowable if discussed and approved. So I guess that's the purpose of this discussion.
Okay. Mr.
And
Beal?
finally, I think the applicant demonstrated the desire to move this pool closer to the house, but was deemed, at least deemed by the contractors as not feasible. So they made every effort to not even have to be here tonight, but it didn't work out that way, so.
Sounds like there's a motion in there somewhere.
All right, I can do that. if we're ready.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to move that the variance request for case VRB 18-116 for property located at 22.5 Hamilton Heath Drive be granted as depicted on the site plan, presented at the public hearing for seeking a decrease in the required wetland setback from 25 feet to 17 feet for the construction of a pool, based on the applicant presenting competent and
Excuse me.
substantial evidence.
Excuse me, Board. The request they note is from 25 to 18, and that's to the edge of the pool.
Yeah.
Okay. All
No,
right.
it says, well, yeah.
So we had
the agenda
25 to
says
17,
25 to
so we're going to go
18.
25 to 18. So let's duly note that as part of this. So that was based on the applicant presenting competent and substantial evidence in the record and at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 27-80 of the city code. And I think in this case, it's the peculiarity of the lot. We have wetlands here. We had, the applicant also making their best effort of trying to accommodate the situation with the wetlands by moving the pool. That was not feasible, so that's why they're here tonight.
Second.
All right, got a motion for Mr. Villa and a second from Mr. Feldman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Your application has been approved, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing such a great job on your presentation. Okay, the next case up is VRB 18-11. The applicant is here. Please stand off to the side of the room.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, this is application number VRB 1911. The property address is 2710 West Louisiana Avenue. Per section 27-156 and 27-290, the applicant is seeking to reduce the east side yard setback from 7 feet to 0 feet and the west side yard setback from 3 feet to 0 feet to allow existing carport and covered concrete area to remain. The property is zoned RS50 and was purchased in 2012. The single-family residence was built in 1957. The property is currently under violation for an illegal covered side yard addition. This is the aerial of the property. And here's the property. This is West Louisiana Avenue. And here's a picture of the front of the property. Here's a photo showing the addition. And this is another photo showing the illegal addition. Here's the site plan. And this is the addition that's before us. And these are the accessory structures that are encroaching, and they're requesting to reduce the primary addition from 7 feet to 0 feet and the accessory structures from 3 feet to 0 feet here. And it would also entail vesting this metal shed in the rear. Are there any questions for staff?
Applicant, please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Owen Valdivia. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Judy Crespo. We have both been sworn in. Address is 2710 West Louisiana Avenue, Tampa, Florida 33614.
been sworn. Okay, go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
Basically, this home was purchased in 1998. We've been living there for quite some time. The actual roof itself was made in 2000. It was just a roof to cover, basically. There's already like cement there, so it's basically a roof to cover that up. In 2016, we did fix the roof because obviously it was bad, and that's when we have to, resubmit permits and whatnot. My mother in 2013 started a daycare from the house, and that's basically what that is. That's basically, for a roof for the daycare itself. So there's not actual carport or anything. The garage, it works normal, and that's just, entrance to the daycare. And for the kids to actually have protection, when they go outside and play. We also have a letter that a bunch of the neighbors signed, basically saying that, it's okay for have that there. And from the actual end of that roof to the other neighbor, you're looking at least 15 feet. So it's not that it's gonna bother anyone at all.
Does that conclude
That's
your
it, sir.
presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There are no other things about your property there that are unique or different, or?
No, that's it.
Okay.
We also have a few neighbors here that, if they wanna speak too.
All right, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on or against this petition? Please come forward. State your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
My name is Eliab Delgado. I live at 2709 West Louisiana. I'm directly in front of them. Mrs. Judy, she's had the daycare. If you've seen the original photo, this is something new to us regarding code enforcement, or the name today, neighborhood enforcement. We are in favor. She runs a daycare. It's necessary for the daycare. Her residence is there. The entrance to the daycare is where the awning is at. They've had that for years. We've never had an issue with code enforcement. There's a new gentleman who's no longer our inspector. We've been harassed, and it's just sad that we're here today. But we've had meetings with the city, and this is what when I say we're trying to help each other. We're a good community, and to us, this is her hardship to her living, that an inspector is the one who's personally went after her with violations, that we are trying to set a meeting with the mayor to try to resolve this. Because it's not just this couple. You're going to hear a lot of people come forward from our community in a way that we've never been approached by this. We now learn that it's a violation, and it's against, I hate to be the one to say it like this, but you're going to see a lot of people apply for variances, and they're all Hispanics, okay? And it's sad. But we're here today to support her, and we have many neighbors here. So. And she's a working person, single. She raised her family there. We have no problems with her. There were gutters applied. The neighbor requested to be able to collect the water. She did that. We're just a community that helps each other. And it's sad that we're here today, but I must say that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
My name is Geraldine Anton Monjovi. I reside at 2717 West Osborne Avenue. I have been sworn in.
Okay.
Okay, we have been in this neighborhood for 48 years, and I am also Hispanic. Okay, 48 years we've been there, and we have been before city council with many issues, many times. This neighborhood has now, I also have a family member that lives on Louisiana, so we're on both of those streets. This applicant asked for the license for daycare. This carport was put up illegally without any kind of permits, as many homes on this block and our block have done. It has spiraled. One does it, the next one follows, the next one is like a domino effect. This woman you have an enormous backyard. If you're only allowed to have 10 children, you can put the covered roof in your backyard. There's no reason to have to encroach on the setback, because what's happened on Louisiana and on Osborne, 2715 Louisiana, 2714 Louisiana, 2714 West Osborne. They put fences on the side of the house. You can't, the inspectors are not allowed to go in the backyard, and they have apartments. Many of these homes have apartments in the back, and they cannot, the code cannot go back there in somebody's backyard. So all these houses, or many of these houses, have apartments in the back. So the vehicles are like 10 vehicles in front of each house. It's just gotten way out of control. I have some photos here. I don't know if it'll fit under this.
Can you help her, Ms. Anthony?
This way, okay. 2710, this is the variance request. 2714 on the east side, they have the structures. You can see there's an apartment in back of that house. 2716 Louisiana on the west side, they're up to the property line with the gutters on the other person's property. 2718, they have a structure on the front setback. Okay, on the front. 2707 Louisiana on the east side. 2721, that's a house that the people had to actually, they lost their home because they had gotten one of these loans, and they built a structure all the way up to the property line, concrete block. Now this house is up for sale, so the next owner of this house is gonna have an issue with that.
Okay,
And we have,
you got about 20 seconds.
okay, 20 seconds, here's the other block. This is West Osborne. On the east side, they're up to the property line. I'm not here, okay. On the east side, 2703 and 2705 has adjoined, 2705 with 23. All these properties are joining each other. And now we have on 2705 West Osborne, they have a school bus. Or does it, well, short upside down. 2705, they also have a daycare. And on the east side, they have a van and a school bus that are parked in front of the property. So this neighborhood is just...
You're going to have to wrap your time
Okay,
up.
so anyway, my
Okay.
husband can continue then.
All right, he's welcome to. Please state your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Okay, my name is Nelson Monjovi. I am her spouse. I live at 2717 West Osborne. I'm going to read what I wrote down to stay within my allotted time. We are here in opposition to the above variance request. The applicant is requesting to reduce the east side yard setback from 7 to 0 and the rear setback from 3 to 0 to keep an attached 56-foot long by 8-foot carport and covered concrete. This variance is being requested in order to continue illegal use of this area. This lot is zoned RS50 single-family residence. This carport was illegally constructed without a building permit or any type of variance. Apparently, the applicant asked for a license for daycare for less than 10 children. The 7-foot to 0 on the east side is not needed, as there is ample room in the rear yard to put up a roofed area for children's activities and a play area if desired. This should be in compliance with the rear yard setback of 3 feet. The 7-foot side setbacks, as well as the front and rear setbacks, were originally put in place as a code of compliance to protect everyone. When contractors build a home, they're required to maintain building code setbacks, and they are inspected to assure that they do so. There has to be side, front, and rear setbacks. If not, every constructed home would adjoin the one belonging to the neighbors and appearing like apartment complexes or army barracks. This buffer zone between homes protects this from happening. This applicant has failed to demonstrate to other properties similarly located that the alleged hardship is unique to their property alone, when in fact all others must comply with the setbacks. This request does not meet the hardship criteria requirements of Chapter 27 of the City of Tampa Code Ordinance. As you are aware, unfortunately, in the city and county, people illegally construct and make additions to their homes, detached and attached. These are done on weekends without legal permits being obtained, knowing full well Had they applied, they would not have had their application or the site plans approved. Many of these illegal structures are put in place, later closed, and used as rental apartments. The examples of 3 now in existence. There are many other homes in this.
20 seconds.
Many other homes in this area that have illegal structures on the 7-foot setback. Code enforcement is currently aware of these and is in the process of having these violations come into compliance. By allowing this flagrant violation to remain would only serve the other violators to ask for the same treatment, which is unfair to other families in this area. Encroachments on dividing property lines between homes are not allowed in order to protect everyone. You must maintain the setbacks that are part of the building code and afford equal treatment to everyone. A self-created hardship.
I'm gonna have to stop you because we have other people and we have a lot of cases to hear.
Okay, all I ask of this board is to do your job and deny this request.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this application? All right, seeing none. Board, do you have any questions for anybody? Mr. Feldman?
All right, I'm sorry, question for the applicant.
Sir.
All right, I'm just trying to understand your application. When did you acquire this property?
1988.
98. And you built
The roof itself was built in 2000. In 2016, it was fixed again because the roof was bad. And again, like we're saying, I mean, there's a daycare there, and we have pictures of the daycare. If you guys want to go and see the daycare, you're more than welcome to. If you want to have your kids there, it's just
We're not interested in use.
Okay.
Use is not our issue. What we want to look at is why does this structure need to be here? Why does it need to encroach into those setbacks? So just so you follow what we typically do in these situations. You with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Usually we'll look at these as if it were a request to build it as new. In other words, ignore the fact that it's already there. We'll look at it and say, okay, why should we allow somebody, if you were to come in today and say we want to build something, why should we allow it to go here? So what we need to understand from you is why this structure needs to go where it is, why you can't do what you want to do with it by putting covered area in the backyard or something else. Can you help us understand?
Well, the daycare itself, from what I'm understanding from my mother, they need to have an area where the kids can play under a roof, and then that's an area where the kids can play, without a roof. So there is the backyard, is their playing area, and there's also a roof area, so the sun doesn't hit the kids, especially in Florida, the sun gets pretty hot out here. So that's what that is on the left side.
Do you have your application with you? Do you have that
Yes.
map? Could you
Says
put
it is
that
a
map
car
on the little overhead projector, please? No, that's not the map. Yes,
Site plan.
thank
You have a
you.
site plan?
There you go. All right, help me understand why we can't, what's that in the back there? What's that area in the back?
Well, in the back, you have a play area. There's also a huge tree in the back.
Okay, so there is, on the,
You can actually see it on this picture, the tree itself. See, that whole tree's in the back. It's pretty big. So the play area for the kids is in front of that tree, basically. From there to where the house is, the back of the house.
okay.
And then the side of the house, is basically the roof cover.
On the other side of the house, the opposite side from where the carport covering is, there's a rectangular box behind it. What is that?
There's a shed back there, and there's like a driveway on the other side.
Okay, so there's a driveway on the opposite side as well?
Yes. You can push, you can drive your car all the way to the back if you want. That's been there since we purchased that home.
Why is it that you couldn't move this spot and cover some of the backyard and leave some of the backyard uncovered?
Well, the actual daycare itself, if you're looking at the house from the back side, it's basically back here. So then, wait. No, see, yeah, it's on the back of the
That's
park.
back.
So this is where the daycare is at, and this is where the kids play, and then this is the other open area in the back, and then the trees right here next to the shed.
I see.
So,
And that rectangle that attaches to the back, that's part of the house itself?
what rectangle? This?
Other side, there you go. That's,
This is where the-
what's that?
That's the open play area right there.
That's the open play.
Yes, right there. And then this is the cover play area. And then the actual daycare is right here. I mean, it's only one babysitter, so it's not, she can have it over here and then run back and forth with the kids that are inside. She has to be able to see the kids at all times. You know?
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I have a question for legal. I know that we're not here to discuss the use, but I don't have a clear understanding in a single-family zoned situation like this, what is allowed with daycare in terms of number of kids, and what are the exact requirements for outdoor protection covering that we're hearing testimony on? Is there a written code or rule that applies here?
The code, the code, and Ms. Anthony can address this as well. The code speaks to the allowance for daycares and a maximum number of children. The requirement for covered play areas does not originate from our code. I believe that may be a state requirement for a covered play area for the children.
Yeah, regardless of the zoning of the property.
Yeah, the state requirements would be for any daycare. It would not be related at all to the city's zoning.
Okay.
Okay.
So to clarify what you're saying, even if the state requires it, they would still have to fall within the city's ordinance for setbacks.
Correct.
The state is not overriding that requirement.
That's correct. Nothing in the state requirement would require an overriding of the setbacks. That's an accurate statement, yes.
Okay, but in this case, the daycare use is allowed and does meet other guidelines that the city has.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, a home daycare is allowed in residential zoning districts. They can have up to 5 children or whatever the state allows per their license when they get approval as a home daycare.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I got. There's no other questions. You have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
There's no bottom. Nothing. We've said enough, I think. I mean, it's especially for protection of the kids for the daycare. That's where they play when they go outside for the sun, and that's basically what it is.
All right, without objection, I'll close the public hearing and open it up for discussion or motion.
I heard no testimony related to the hardship of the property or the building. It appears that this could be done in part of the backyard. There's nothing unique or singular about a 61-foot by 120-foot rectangular lot. Even if we were, as Mr. Feldman mentioned, looking at this as new, I can't imagine ever approving a 0 lot line for virtually any covered purpose. So I cannot support this.
Any other comments? I would weigh in the same way. If this were brought to us as a proposed structure, we would have to hear a lot more hardship as to why it had to be there versus somewhere else.
Also, we heard testimony that this was self-created. It was built after the current homeowner owned the home. So this was built without a building permit. And just to elaborate on the hardship a little bit, the application that everybody fills out to come here specifically spells out the criteria that must be addressed, and that was not done in this case.
All right, would someone like to make a motion?
I move the variance request for case BRB 1911 for the property located at 2710 West Louisiana Avenue for a reduction in the east side yard from 7 feet to 0 feet and west side yard from 3 feet to 0 feet with encroachment of eaves and gutters be denied due to the failure of the petitioner to meet its burden of proof to provide competent and substantial evidence in the record, and at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 2780 of the city code, specifically that no hardships related to the property or the building were presented to justify the location or size of the structure in question.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. DePapa. Motion made by Mr. Pasteur. All in favor of denial of the application? Vote aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Your application was denied 5-0. You do have 10 days to appeal to City Council.
If we appeal, will we be back in front of you guys?
No, to City Council.
To
It
City
won't be
Council.
us. You would go to City Council.
Okay, and to receive proper documentation on
Are you
your
done?
offices or how we contact you guys?
Sir, you will be contacted, the applicant will be contacted after this hearing with confirmation of the
So
of
if
the
I wanted to
denial.
receive this, everything you was stated, how will I go about?
You can order a DVD of the hearing for tonight,
Okay.
and that you can look on the city's website for that
We'll be back.
information.
We'll be back to City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. All right, the next case is VRB 19-20. Would the applicant, if they're there, please stand up in the aisle and let us know you're here. Go ahead.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, this is application number VRB 1920. The property address is 220 North Howard Avenue, per section 27283.7. The applicant is seeking to reduce the required parking spaces from 19 to 9 to allow for a change of use to the existing 2-story building from professional office to medical office. The property is zoned CG and was purchased in 2018. According to Hillsborough County Property Appraiser, the 3,048 square foot commercial building was constructed in 1934. Transportation has objected to the request, and they are here for questions.
I have a question for legal. I'm wondering if, since I am in the medical profession, if I should not be on this case. I don't know who the petitioner is or their business, but I wonder if it's a conflict.
I do not believe that it would be a conflict unless it would actually be an entity related to the entity that you are affiliated with.
It could potentially be a competitor.
Given that situation, I'll leave it to your discretion. But if you felt that there was a potential appearance of impropriety, that you might want to recuse yourself in this case.
I don't know if I have the ability to find out what type of business this is before I do that. What do you think? Or should I just state my position and let them make that decision? I don't know how to proceed.
I think that rather than going into, whether or not it's potential conflict, if you feel that there's a possibility it's a conflict, it may be best for you to recuse yourself in that situation.
I agree.
And given that, Mr. Bentley, we are down to only 4 board members. You may continue as of right if that is your preference.
No, thank you. I'd like to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Tawanda.
Here's an aerial of the site. This is Howard Avenue, North B. It is a corner lot. Here's a photo of the front of the property. Here's a photo showing the alley and the proposed parking area. Here's another photo of the proposed parking. This is a photo along North B Street, and they will also be providing some parking along North B. And this is another photo showing North B. This is the site plan, the existing building, and the proposed parking. They are providing or proposing to provide 9 parking spaces. You can see parking along North B, and then you see the parking here along the alley. Is there any question for staff?
Nope, I don't see any. What? We do have
Sorry.
one. Go ahead.
Did you say 9 parking spaces? The package says 8.
Yeah, our package and our agenda say 8.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, they did bring it to my attention that they are proposing 9 parking spaces, and they have presented that to transportation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. May I proceed?
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Mark Bentley, 401 East Jackson Street, Tampa, 33602, and I have been sworn. Just to advise the board is that there's a pending site plan that's been signed off on by both Natural Resources and Urban Design that now has 9 parking spaces. So that's on file with the city. I've got a copy here to enter into the record. But in any event, I represent Tampa Rejuvenation, and this would be their 7th location in the Tampa Bay area. I think they have 3 others actually in Tampa, or 4. The use of the property will be a wellness center, weight loss, hormonal therapy, and similar services. In light of the fact that the client is very familiar with parking codes and their requirements, they feel that the 9 parking spaces as proposed are sufficient for their needs. They'd have 2 to 3 employees, and they anticipate having about 3 clients at any given time. So this is considered a change of use because the prior use looked like kind of a renegade operation, I guess you could call it that, was characterized as professional office. The parking ratio was 3.3 per thousand. Now this is medical office and it's 6 per thousand. Therefore, that created the conflict and need for us to be here, along with some other reasons, which I'll explain to the board, that presents a significant hardship on the property owner in trying to deal with this unique property and unique situation. The building is a converted bungalow built in 1934. I've got a picture from one of the sides on the overhead. So the client had the opportunity, obviously, to demolish the building and proceed and build a new building, but he respected the character and integrity of not only the building but the neighborhood, and kind of just jumped in and wants to do this project here and salvage this old building. It's roughly 85 years old at this point in time. So this is very challenging to redevelop a project like this because in this situation, not only the city's general codes imposed, but it's also subject to the West Tampa overlay urban design. So there's multiple challenges. So the new code requirements that reduce parking opportunities at the subject property are a 24-foot parking backup requirement, the prohibition from using the existing parking spaces on the north and south sides that were used by the predecessor professional office. The buffer requirements are very significant, and I analyzed that this afternoon, and I was pretty amazed and impressed that there's a 10-foot buffer required for the west side of the property, 8 feet for the north, 8 feet to the east. So just these buffers alone consume 26% of the entire property that are just kind of sacred territory that you can't do anything, parking, what have you. It's 26% are dedicated to buffers. There's also a requirement to provide protective radii for oaks and palms on the site. We've been working through Natural Resources, and Mr. Knox is here. Of all the trees on the property, we're only going to eliminate 1 palm that's adjacent to the alley and preserve all the other trees on site. What I'd like to do now is, I know you've got a long agenda, just kind of zip through these photos Here's the front of the house facing Howard. I think Tawanda's shown you a few. Here's looking south, it's a north elevation from North B Street. Here's how we started out. The original site plan that went through permitting and got rejected, we had 13 parking spaces, and we filed last July. And we've kind of worked our way through the system. At this point in time, the only issue is parking. We've narrowed it down to that. So there's 13. Now here's the site plan, Mr. Chairman, that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. That's been signed off on by the city, but for the parking. And you see here we've got 9 parking spaces. And this is the landscape plan. You can see the one with the X is the only tree out of all these trees located on the property that's going to be eliminated. I'll skip that. There are plenty, it's in a heavy commercialized area. There are plenty other parking opportunities off campus, I guess you'd say, in the event it ever became a problem through the city's design exception process. This is a view toward the eastern neighbor here, and these are some of the trees that are going to be saved, but for this one tree I'm pointing to right there. This is a former parking area for the predecessor, and no longer can we use that area right here per city code. We can get a couple spaces in front of the house right here. Here again, we're looking south toward the alley toward North A Street. Here's a shot of the house. You could see the condition I showed you on the earlier photo. And located across the street, here's an off-site parking opportunity if it ever came up, and we don't anticipate it, where you could lease surplus spaces from this law office, another law office down the street. Here's our immediate neighbor to the south. It's some kind of commercial use. So in summary, the evidence shows that this is a unique situation. The building is already there and is 85 years old, in a building that our client is trying to redevelop on a heavily treed lot. There needs to be some flexibility in the application of city codes to encourage the city's redevelopment and preservation policies, especially in a situation like this where you're subject to an additional level of regulation that West Tampa overlay. Redevelopment of this 85-year-old structure is clearly in the public interest. The client has 6 other similar facilities and believes that 6 to 9 spaces will make this a successful operation. They would not do anything to inconvenience the client or jeopardize the obvious significant investment they're making in the property. I think if you look on the property appraiser's website, they paid roughly $700,000 just for that building in its present condition. The granting of the variance will not prejudice any owner or the public interest. The property is unique, must meet the code while preserving this historic structure. The facility closes at 3 p.m. on Friday and is closed Saturday and Sunday. If parking should become an issue, as I mentioned, there are many parking opportunities off-site on adjacent commercial properties. And because the client has demonstrated that it has done everything reasonably possible to comply with city codes, there is clearly a unique situation here that imposes an unnecessary hardship on the client. So it was rather quick, and I could have given you the long version, but...
You still have 2.5 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll save it
You're
for
talking
rebuttal.
fast.
Rebuttal against myself, you know. But that's it, unless you have any questions.
Well, we're going to wait. Does transportation want to say something now? And then we'll ask anybody in the audience if they want to speak on the application.
My name's John Marsh. Transportation, I'm here for Jonathan Scott, who can't attend. I was instructed that transportation objects to the parking reduction from 19 to 8 on the grounds. This is, I think it's about a 58% decrease. It's excessive. It will result in the overflow parking into the neighborhood. Once this is granted, there is no mechanism that will require them to lease additional parking. And the next tenant, that will be a medical use, may meet the projected demand for that square feet. There are a few other issues that we will attach to any permit in transportation. One is the alley. We need to examine the alley. It may need to be paved to City of Tampa standards from Howard to Armenia. We are not sure if the parallel space that was marked number 9 on the site plan meets our requirements for maneuvering into the parallel space totally out of the right-of-way, so we're not sure if that's a viable space or not. Staff was, the 24-foot measurement, which includes the platted alley width, wasn't marked on the site plan. We're not sure if there really is 24 feet, though it's probably pretty close. And the driveway apron on North B probably will need to be modified. But those are all things that we'll deal with as part of the normal permitting practice. But the site does have some other issues.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this application? Please come forward. She faked me out. Okay, are there any questions from the board of anybody or staff?
I have a question for transportation first.
Yes, sir.
What is it that you would need to see to satisfy you if the applicant were to obtain some agreement for off-site parking?
The code, there is a provision in the code
Okay.
for leasing off-site parking within 1,000 feet if the donor site has spaces available in excess.
Okay.
And typically I get these all the time where somebody requires 24 spaces, they only have 18, then I will ask them, what are you going to do about your parking? So that's traditionally done as part of any standard review.
All right, so can that agreement be contingent upon use? In other words, can they create an agreement that would allow them the use should they need it, but that doesn't actually require them to reserve those spaces open?
I'm not a lawyer, I can't tell you that.
Legally, you want to take that?
I think I can. We have very specific requirements for those leases. They have to be for 5 years, renewable. We typically would not allow a sort of springing condition, if you will. It's when the use comes in and we look at staff at land development looks at that parking requirement, they then state how many spaces are left over to be recovered through the lease process. Legal would make sure it meets the requirements, and then it would be in place for at least a 5-year period. And that's the way those leases are typically handled.
Well, I just want to understand, and I don't want to get into really hypotheticals, but they need 10 spaces.
Correct.
Right, in order to satisfy this.
Correct.
So if they had the ability to use those 10 spaces, even though they're saying they don't ever expect to use them.
Correct.
If they have the ability to use those 10 spaces, will that satisfy the requirements that they have a 5-year agreement and they have the ability to use those spaces, regardless of what they pay for them or what?
Yes, we require, as with any lease, we require that there be a statement of consideration, but there's no specific amount. They could have an agreement to just hold 10 spaces with someone as long as it met our leasing requirements. That would be fine. It would satisfy us.
Okay, and so there's nothing that would prevent them from, in that agreement, saying, we have the right to use these 10 spaces, and if we use them this amount of the time, we'll pay you X, but if we use them 10 times that amount, we'll pay you Y.
That would be permitted.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that, just to clarify, that lease agreement would normally be a part of this application if they were requesting less than required on-site parking.
It would be a part of their approval at land development, yes.
So since that agreement, we heard testimony, that agreement doesn't exist.
Correct.
So we can't
Yeah,
assume it's going to exist, right?
No, and if it existed, they would not need the variance.
Right, okay. Yeah, they wouldn't be here, bottom line.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I have a question for transportation. How does off-site parking play into your formulas, or does it?
Basically,
not to
go down the rabbit hole, but
not
yeah.
the lease part.
Okay, so all parking is supposed to be entirely on-site. We do not allow off-site parking. to count towards your requirement. So when you, the leasing issue is a way, you're still meeting your parking requirement on private property if it meets all these other little requirements. You know, it's accessible, you're able to cross over, you have the lease. So as far as we're concerned in that way, that's one of the outs that we created for people.
So on-street parking is not a part of your formula at all?
It is not supposed to be. There have been times things go to council and people are arguing for a reduction because there is ample on-street parking.
Okay.
Our objection is based on we don't want to see a lot of extra parking spilling into the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay, I'm just curious in this case, is there any on-street parking on Howard?
At that location, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I just got this case like an hour before, so.
Okay.
I'm kind of
never
winging
mind.
it.
Anybody else have any other questions? I have one more for legal. I'll let somebody else go.
So I would ask the applicant then, what, I mean, look, the point that transportation has made is that you may not be the last tenant owner of this building. And at some point in the future, someone else may take over and have a different use than yours that requires additional parking, and suddenly they've got the ability to have less parking than that, and they're dumping 10 parking spaces on the neighbors. And so the issue I'm trying to figure out is how we can get there, because I do see the trend toward ride sharing, toward things like that, and the ability to move away from the necessity of parking. But I'm trying to understand how we can get there and what avenues you see as viable to resolve this situation and keep us from having to burden your neighbors with these with this parking issue.
May I address that?
That's a question. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. First of all, in terms of off-site parking, street parking, I was out there today. I didn't see it was the ability to do that on Howard, but certainly on North B Street, which is a very significant right of way, probably in the magnitude of 80 to 100 feet. But to address your suggestion, I brought up the leasing thing, and I knew it'd probably lead to a lot of discussion going down that path. But what we could have done is actually just go through the design exception with the lease, like Kristen indicated, with 5 years. And you could have multiple leases, lease one spot here, 3 here to satisfy code. However, the challenge here is that the city, on the one hand, the preservationists don't want us to knock the building down, okay? So we're trying to balance these competing interests here. You heard testimony from me that the client has 6 other facilities and that parking is sufficient. Now, I understand your concern is, hey, Bentley, that makes sense for your guy, but when they're out of there in 2 years or he sells the property, then what are we gonna do? But that's just a challenge in an urban setting. These redevelopment projects, you guys sit up here for a long time, it always comes down to parking on these redevelopment sites when you're trying to convert a historic structure or house, something like that, to some alternative use, whether it's Howard Avenue, North Howard, you know. So what we could do is, you know, just withdraw the application and go get a lease and move on. But I didn't think that under these circumstances that it would be problematic. And like I mentioned before, we've been in permitting since last July. We've had multiple meetings with all the departments. And no disrespect to Mr. Marsh, but he told you here, after we've been spending all these time and effort with attorneys and architects and arborists, et cetera, that he's not familiar with the case. He said there are other problems with the site, that he's not familiar with, but he said there's problems. And before he got off here at the podium, he said, I'm not familiar, but I'm just winging it, okay? And it's all come down to this. We filed this application. We have sign-offs we've got recently from urban design and also they signed off on parking to a certain extent too. Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, and you'll have ample time in rebuttal to
Okay,
address this. I just want to focus on the issue that I was trying, and I appreciate you, it was a little bit of an open-ended question, and I appreciate that you were trying to address it. Is there some, I want you to understand, my views on these types of requests are evolving to some degree. So if maybe we're open to some reduction, but not the magnitude that you're talking about, is there some lesser amount of a lease that you would be able to secure?
Instead of us just kind of, I guess, doing this thing on the fly, why don't I just, we've got all these people waiting patiently, and you guys have a long agenda. Why don't I just continue this case, hopefully till next month, and I can address some of these issues that we weren't aware of, raised by Mr. Marsh's department, and also talk to the client about alternative parking opportunities, whether it's leasing or not, so we can just move on.
Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
given that there were some issues raised by transportation that were not necessarily addressed beforehand, I think it makes sense to continue this, particularly in light of the number of board members as well, but because of the issues
I
raised.
totally agree, but I want to ask council one question, and maybe it's an obvious answer, but when it comes to parking spaces per 1,000 square feet for medical use, there's only one medical use. There's no differentiation between one type of medical use that, and I didn't hear testimony, but maybe they had by appointment only, and their space can only physically take in, 3 patients at a time, versus a doctor's office where we know the parking becomes a huge issue because people show up, they wait for hours sometimes, and that's when the parking overflows into the neighborhoods. So is there only one size fits all when it comes to medical?
I believe that is the case. I do not believe that there's a distinction within our code of by appointment medical versus a more urgent care or other type of situation where there might be a much greater demand.
Okay, all right, that was my only question, and if somebody wants to make a motion for continuance. All right.
I'm sorry, what would the date be? Because I'm going to be maybe out of town.
Well, it's not going to be March.
Well, it could, because we only had 12.
Oh, I
so
thought we
could
were already
actually
up to 13.
We could actually go to 13.
How many do we have for March right now? We have 12. We're max.
No, 13.
Oh, 13's max, so excuse me. Okay, yeah, we could do March.
What's the
March
date?
12th.
Oh, God. Why don't do April 9th, just to be on the safe side, so I don't have to, and I don't have to renotice, do I, Kristen, since it's continued on the record?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, motion to-
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to continue this application until the March 12th.
April 9th.
Pardon me, April 9th.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, you've been
Okay.
continued.
Hey, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. The next case will be VRB 19-22.
No.
Nope,
23.
excuse me. Didn't mark through it. 23, 19-23.
Wanda Anthony Land Development, this is application number VRB 1923. The property address is 4911 West San Rafael Street, per section 27-156. The applicant is seeking to reduce the side yard from 7 feet to 1 feet to keep an unpermitted enclosed back porch. The property is zoned RS 75 and RS 100. There's a split zoning on the property and was purchased by the applicant originally in 1988. The existing single-family residence was built in 1960. The property is currently under violation for work without permits. There is an open permit for an unconditioned covered patio on an existing concrete slab. This is the aerial showing the property. There's a photo of the existing house. Here's another photo, and you can see the porch. Another photo. This is San Rafael, and this is a survey of the property, and this is the area in question. It's before us. I'll blow it up on the site plan. And you can see some of the elevations showing the structure. And this is the structure here. Are there any questions for staff?
I see none, not at this time. Applicant, please come forward.
I believe are you receiving the presentation materials?
We've
Okay.
got them.
I wasn't sure if you did or not. I didn't see them.
Please state your name, address, and if
Yes.
you've been sworn.
Good evening, board members. Gina Grimes with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, 101 East Kennedy Boulevard. And tonight I'm before you representing Mark Ober. Mark is standing here to my left. He is the owner of the subject property. Property in the picture here, circled in red, is west of West Shore on West San Rafael Street. It was our request, as Tawanda mentioned, is to reduce the side setback along this property line from 7 feet to 1 foot for this covered screen enclosure. The property was platted back in 1958, and as you can see, it was platted as an irregularly shaped lot. And these documents are in your presentation materials too. You can see it's a polygon, and it's located, very importantly, at the very end of the canal. The other unique aspect of the property is that it actually has a split zoning. What that means is that the zoning line actually goes right through the middle of the property, right here in yellow. Property to the north, in the north half of this lot, is zoned RS 100. The south half is zoned RS 50, or RS 75, I'm sorry. The home that currently exists on the site was built originally in 1960. It's the same home, the same footprint. Was a very modest 1,700 square foot house. Mr. Ober purchased it in 1988, so he's lived there for the last 31 years. And when he purchased the property, there was a screen room that existed at the rear of the property. We're not sure when it was constructed, but this appraisal, it's also in your book, dates back to 1994, and it shows the screen room right here at the rear of the house. In the late 1990s, there was a storm, a water spout that came down the canal and actually ripped off that screen room, and it was destroyed. For about 20 years after that, Mr. Ober lived without a screen room. He had the deck in the back, and the dock, and the canal, and he also had very good neighbors. He peacefully coexisted with those neighbors. He didn't have a fence. They had no walls. He tells me that they were the kind of neighborhood where they looked after one another. That all changed in 2014. And that's when the property immediately to the west, 4913 West San Rafael, was purchased. And that the new owners began construction of a new home, over 5,000 square feet. And in this setting, I would submit to you that it is a textbook definition of a McMansion. As you can see, this home towers entirely over Mr. Ober's smaller home to the east. The Frys are the current owners of this property, and as you can also see from the aerial, this is their home, this is Mr. Ober's home. They built setback to setback, and that wasn't even enough for them. They requested a design exception because they wanted to exceed the setback requirements. So they applied to the staff, and in your package of materials you can see here is the setback lines, and you can see where their home extends even beyond the setback line. That was the first variance that he requested. Second variance or waiver that he got was removal of a 42-inch oak tree in the front yard. Mr. Ober didn't object to that, nor did he object to the setback variance, the design exception 2, to have the rear setback waived. Didn't object. Mr. Ober didn't object to that. He didn't object to the removal of the grand tree. Mr. Frey also requested a seawall extension that was immediately adjacent to Mr. Ober's property. Mr. Ober agreed to that too. Then it was the fourth variance request where the issue arose. And that request was for a dock and a boat slip to be constructed perpendicular to Mr. Frey's property. And while Mr. Ober was more than willing to accommodate his earlier 3 variance requests, this request would have affected Mr. Ober's property and prevented him from being able to use his boat slip. So he objected, as did the neighbors on the other side of Mr. Frey. At that point, the neighborhood relations soured, and Mr. Frey was very angry with Mr. Ober for objecting to that variance for the dock and the boat lift, and ended up constructing a different dock and boat lift. And things endured that way, the tension endured that way for a couple years. And then Mr. Ober started experiencing finding rocks in his truck bed, finding rocks in his boat, finding rocks on his deck. And at that point, he decided that he needed to do something to provide some privacy and a buffer from the adjacent property. And that's when he hired a handyman in 2018 who told him that he could rebuild the previously existing screen porch as long as it was on the same slab. And if he did so, he wouldn't require a permit. So construction began under that situation. Someone called code enforcement. Mr. Ober then hired an architect, prepared plans, submitted them to the building department. The building department rejected the plans because of the setback violation, and so here we are today. And Mr. Ober I'm going to show you some pictures of what he has proposed to construct, because all along his primary concern was protection from the adjacent home and also privacy. You can see just on 2 sides there's a hard structure and there's a hard roof. This is a picture to show the adjacent property, the Frey property, and the height of their children's playhouse, which actually exceeds the height of the proposed screen room. There's several other pictures in your book. I'm not going to include all of them here, but I did want to go through and show you these very quickly. Again, this is the picture of the screen porch back here, and I'll show you where the screen is. It's just 2 sides where it's hard, where it's immediately adjacent to the large home next door. Again, you can see the height of the children's playhouse on the Frey property is even higher. Here you have the entry, the hard side, and you can start to see inside. Again, it's constructed on the existing slab, and I took a picture of the slab itself so that you could see that it was old cement. You could see it even better on the inside, where you see the patio right outside the family room, and then the old slab. So the handyman constructed a wall on this side, and then all the rest of it is screen. And the doors are open at this point. There's not even doors on it. Just to show you what the inside is like, again, this is the hard covered area immediately adjacent to the children's playhouse and the Frey home. And And this is the screen that faces out towards the canal. Lastly, from kind of walking through it, you can see the dock off to the north. And then here's a picture standing on the dock looking back towards the screen room, screen on two sides, hard covered on that side, and then the freight house. And again, you can see how it towers over this house. We have the support of several neighbors. There's several people here to speak tonight. The only objector we have of all people is Mr. Frey. And not only is he objecting, but he's hired an attorney to attend the hearing here tonight and to fight it. And I spoke to the attorney, he gave me the professional courtesy of telling me that he'd be here this evening, and what he told me was that Mr. Frey feels that this variance is substantial, and that he objects to it. I think, in my view, that's the height of hypocrisy when you've requested 4 variances of your own and your house is towering over another person's home, to say that this variance is substantial. Furthermore, it's his actions that are creating the need for the variance. Mr. Ober didn't have a screen porch or didn't have the need for one for 20 years, and it wasn't until this new home was built that he thought that he would need to have one.
Ms. Grimes, you need to wrap up.
Okay, I'm going to move right on to the hardship criteria.
Well, you've already used your 10 minutes.
Oh, can I get through those real fast? I did submit to you in writing the hardship, our responses to the hardship criteria, but it's an irregular lot, split zoning. It's unique in that respect. There's a previous porch constructed in the same location. We have the need for privacy. Nobody else shares those kinds of situations as we do. The hardship did not result from the actions of the applicant. They've, as I said, lived without the screen porch, constructed it only for privacy and protection from the neighbor. The variance doesn't interfere or injure the rights of others. The height of the porch roof is only 8 feet. It's lower than the children's playhouse. You can't see it from the Frey side of the property, and it's closed and won't interfere with their use of their property. And then substantial justice. The variance will result in substantial justice because it'll allow Mr. Ober to build a closed-in porch and protect his yard from the adjacent home. Given the scale of his porch relative to the scale of the adjacent home, we think allowing him to reconstruct the porch where it previously existed will result in substantial justice. And thank you for indulging me and letting me get that on the record.
Well, we're gonna.
I understand that, but I need to make a.
Sure.
I apologize. And I apologize because I didn't realize this until you started your presentation. I own a lot on 4924 West San Rafael Street, which is a vacant lot, but I think technically puts me within the notice area. I didn't get a notice because it's a vacant lot, but because of that, I think I have to recuse myself from this hearing. So I'm going to step out, and I'll let council address whatever needs to get addressed from this point.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Mr. Feldman has needed to recuse himself for the reasons stated, and so that does bring us down to 4 board members. You are entitled to a continuance to a full board if you would like it.
We'll go for it.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone in the audience tonight that would like to speak on behalf of this application, either for or against? Please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Good evening, my name is Sam Mirabella Jr. I live at 4909 San Rafael Street. I'm Mark's next door neighbor. He's been my neighbor for over 20 years. I strongly...
Have you been sworn in?
Yes, I have been sworn in.
Okay, thank you.
I strongly support what Mark's done. It looks very nice in the neighborhood, which are all ranch-style homes. If there's anything that's out of whack in the neighborhood, it's the mini mansion that was just put up there. But as you can see, there's going to be many more people to talk in Mark's favor. He's been a great neighbor, and we think that he did a great job on the porch. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next.
Good evening. My name is Joe Lopez. Do you need an address?
Yeah, I need your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Yes, sir.
Okay, your name and address. Your name and address.
Joseph K. Lopez Sr., 1204 Culberthiles Drive, here in Tampa, 33629. I've known Mr. Ober for more than 40 years. I've lived in South Tampa for over 35 years. I'm very familiar with when Mr. Ober acquired that property. I'm very familiar with the layout of that property. I've been there many, many, many times through the years. I've been professionally engaged with Mr. Ober. I've been socially engaged with Mr. Ober. We've spent a lot of time there at his house. You saw the screen enclosure. It sits in the exact same footprint as where this now partial wood screen enclosure sits. And if anything, provides more of a barrier of security or its privacy than would have otherwise been if that structure hadn't been blown down. I've been there many times. I've never seen the neighbors wandering around complaining about invasion of their privacy or anything of that nature. So I'm here to verify what counsel has said as a presentation of the evidence, because what she said is an accurate representation of what the situation has existed. South Tampa, as you all probably know better than anybody, has gone from smaller homes on smaller lots to great, much larger houses on much larger lots. And that's what happened here. They built a very, very, very large house on a existing lot with a home that's been there since the 1960s. And as a result, someone's unhappy that perhaps the structure's too close. So I would be much in favor of granting of the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Linda Rhodes. I live at 4906 West San Rafael Street. I have been sworn. I live directly across the street from Mr. Ober and Mr. Fry. I come out my front door, I look out my windows, and I see what I call the castle fortress. I don't believe that Mr. Fry respected his neighbors or the integrity of the neighborhood. He's been pretty, and I have not had any direct confrontation or conversation with him. I've just watched this mansion fortress go up. And I believe that he is towering over Mr. Ober's property, and I think Mr. Ober needs some relief from this board and from the council, city, whoever, to be able to continue to live in his home for many years peacefully and quietly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next. Name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Good evening. I have not been sworn. My name is Wayne Timmerman. I'm a retired circuit judge. I live 2 doors from Mr. Ober.
Hang on, we're going to have
west.
to swear you in, Mr. Judge.
And anyone else in the audience that has not been sworn in but plans or may give testimony this evening, please stand and raise your right hand so you may be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll reaffirm everything I said earlier under oath.
Okay, thank
As
you.
I said, I live at 4917 West San Rafael, which is 2 doors to the west of Mr. Ober. The canal runs east and west. Most of our homes face the canal either south or north. My house happens to face the south. The rear of my house faces the north. Mr. Ober is on the end of the canal and looks down the canal. So this structure that he's proposing to replace is simply something that had been there for many years. I've lived there for 18 years, and I've known Mark for probably 40. All he wants to do is get some privacy from this house that, in my opinion, is overbuilt on the lot. It's an interesting lot. It's pie-shaped. It's only got 45 feet of waterfront, where most of us have 100. But because of the pie shape, the house was kind of forced in there, and I guess that's what led to this gentleman coming down and asking for various types of variances, because he's dealing with something that only he has, which unfortunately is 45 feet instead of 100. I think Mark's property is probably roughly 100. All he wants to do is replace something that was already there. It's in no way going to impede anyone's view of anything, anyone's access of anything. He just wants some protection from this overbearing structure next door where he doesn't have that now. He did earlier, as the attorney quite correctly said, the former neighbors, there was never any issue, never any need. They had a ranch-style house like all of us have in that area. But their house was purchased and by this gentleman who tore it down and then built this thing that just takes up literally almost every square foot of the property. And you know, there's no way that this structure is going to bother him. He's only bothered because he couldn't get what he wanted.
You have about 20 seconds to wrap
I don't
up.
need 20 seconds more.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Next.
Joey Lopez on behalf of Mr. Ober as well. I've been sworn. My address is 4817 West Baycourt Avenue, Tampa, Florida. There's a lot of people here speaking. I'll keep it very concise. I understand that the committee here has an obligation to find legal cause and under a certain basis to make these approvals and to give this permission. I think that the committee's obligation similarly needs to be to advance the interest of the community and the residents. That is certainly what would be served by the allowance of this. It seems as though it would harm no one. It would advance Mr. Ober's residential interest and is something that's been given to those around him and would seem like a practical thing and should serve to give the committee a good reason to find the variance. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Next.
My name is Peter Rhodes. I live at 4906 West San Rafael. I live directly across from Mark Ober, and my wife spoke earlier.
Have you been sworn in?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
yes,
thank you. Go ahead.
I think it's pretty much everything has been said, and all I can say is what a good neighbor and friend Mark Ober has been for 30 years that I've been on that street. The house is it's huge. I can get almost a mile away to Henderson and see it there. At night, when it lights up, I can't help but think of the Amityville Horror, if any of you ever seen that, the way the configuration of the windows. It's I don't know the man, Mr. Fry, but he just seems like a difficult and unreasonable man from everything that I hear. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Justin Lopez. I live at 1204 Colbert Drive in Tampa, Florida, 33602. I have been sworn. I've had the honor of knowing Mr. Ober since I was a child. I kind of grew up doing things with him and my father. I've never, without being repetitive of everything that everyone has said tonight, I've never seen Mr. Ober have a disagreement with somebody of substance whatsoever. He has integrity like no other. He has devoted his entire career to the service of his community, and I feel that those should be things that should be taken into consideration for tonight, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Steve Parker. I live at 1909 Southwest Shore Boulevard, 33629. I have been sworn in. Okay. I've owned my home since 1994 when I first moved to Tampa, and Mr. Ober has been my neighbor for the entire time. He is an absolutely wonderful human being, and he has integrity like no other. He's the first one to lend a hand, and he's a wonderful, wonderful person. I could see where this other structure was built right next to him, that his privacy completely went away. And I think all of us have the right to privacy, and when that privacy is taken from us, we have to do something to protect our interest. And to have something built so much higher, to be able to look into your bedroom windows or your private areas is tough. It's a tough way to live. And this gives him just a smidge more of privacy, which I think is he more than deserves. And I don't want to repeat what others have said, but I thank you for your time, and I hope it works out for all.
Thank you very much. Next. Name, address, and have you been sworn?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Dr. Amber Parker. I live at 1909 Southwest Shore Boulevard. I have been sworn. First, I had no idea what you guys do as a board. We really appreciate it. I've known Mark for well over a decade. I don't want to, again, repeat everything, but he truly has no privacy without having some kind of barrier there. Mark is a simple man. He loves to sit out on his porch and enjoy looking down the canal. He likes to crab. He likes to fish. He spends a tremendous amount of time out there. And to have no privacy and to feel like you're constantly being watched, the children's play area is right here. Like, it's amazingly close. So to have a little barrier there really is only fair. And he does use that area a lot, and what is being built in no way impacts any other neighbors. I don't even think it impacts the Fries. I don't think they can see, because again, they're sort of up here. I don't think his structure impacts them at all. So we would hope that you would allow him to keep it, because he does enjoy that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
My name is Jim Downham. I've been sworn, by the way. I live at 6100 Avenue of the Palms in Weeki Wachee, Florida. That's in Hernando County. Mark and I have enjoyed each other's company and fished together for over 40 years. I'm here to attest to the fact that what he is attempting to do is in the same footprint that was already there. And if you can imagine what's going to take place, I know you saw the pictures, but assume that this is the canal here and the monstrosity house is here. He is going to put a solid wall here and here with a doorway over here so that he can still enjoy the canal without having to look at the play yard, the pool, and the house that just towers. To say it towers his house is an understatement. It's 3 times the height of his house. Okay, somebody said he's a simple man. He is. Good man, good person, good neighbor, I'm sure. He had no objections to 3 variances before. He needs, I think he needs a little fairness back. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Mark Cox. I live at 2918 Winding Trail Drive in Valrico. I have been sworn. I have known Mark Ober for over 30 years. I have been to his house countless times. I know that he's a good neighbor to all these people. They've turned to him many times with many problems. Mark's always willing to help. The atmosphere changed drastically when this house appeared. And when you walk out Mark's sliding door, everything has changed. You feel like you're almost in a canyon. The pictures don't do it justice as far as the height difference. So I think by Mark building this small room compared to what he has to deal with next door, I think he needs some relief and your consideration. I appreciate what you do, and I hope you make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Rebecca Lane. I live at 4905 West San Rafael, Tampa, Florida, 33629. I have lived in the neighborhood
Have you been
since...
sworn?
Yes, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
We moved into the neighborhood in 1992, and Mark has been our neighbor during that entire time. It's been a wonderful neighborhood to live in and on the street. And it is true that the new home that was built that is towering Mark's residence was very, very large. And I think it did infringe on his personal space, his property space. But they had that right to build it. But however, Mark's privacy and his right to his space, I think, also needs to be respected. He has tried and worked with the people in previous variance requests, as we have been heard, and I really don't want to go through all of that again, but I think that in this particular case, since we're not asking for something to be totally newly constructed, it was a space that was already existed and a porch that was there, that I hope that the council will give favorable consideration to this request. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Before I begin, if I may, I have been sworn. Eric Page, I'm representing Mr. Frey, who is the directly adjacent neighbor. We've heard a lot from neighbors in opposition. I would respectfully request from the chair and from the board an additional 5 minutes to address these issues. I'm not going to address everything that's in the packet you've been provided. I'm not going to go through all the pictures, but I do, to address the 5 criteria and to address some of the points that have been raised, need some extra time to get through these things.
What's the board's pleasure? I don't see any reason for it, but I'm not opposed to giving him an extra 3 minutes, you know, a total of 6 minutes.
I will.
Can you do it in that?
I'll do what I can do in 6
Thank
minutes.
you.
How about that?
All right, let me start the clock again.
All right, Eric Page with Schutz and Bowen, Suite 300, 4301 West Boy Scout Boulevard, Tampa, Florida, 33607. I have been sworn. We are opposing this request. This aerial shows the red property is Mr. Ober's property. It does dead end the canal. Well, actually, the canal does not dead end there. It wraps around. That's an inaccurate statement that was made in the variance request. My client's property is to the southwest, right there. One point that I'll get to in a little more detail later, you can see Mr. Ober's property is very, very similar to the property that is directly to the east in terms of having the canal eating up a little bit of its property and as well being oddly shaped. So it is at least similar in size and type to a directly adjacent property. The only person here that is opposing this variance is the only person here that is impacted by this variance, and that's my client, because this structure moves 6 feet towards the shared property line. This structure would have been built and completed with no plans and no permits had code enforcement not stopped it. It must be looked at as a new request, as if nothing is there, as the board has already discussed earlier tonight. Contrary to the presentation of the materials, at least, my client's house is 2 stories, not 3. My client's house is not 5,000 feet under central heat and air. It's about 4,500. My client's house was also...
Quiet. I mean, let's respect the person speaking, please.
I appreciate that, and I'm also glad this is not a popularity contest. This is my client's property as built. You saw a survey previously that had a dashed line and a request to build outside of that dashed line in a lot of areas. There is one tiny itty-bitty spot built outside. It is in the direction of the canal, not in the direction of any neighbor, and it is about 1.6 feet and less than a foot. There's a tiny little corner that went outside. But otherwise, my client's property was planned, permitted, inspected, and approved with a CO within its setbacks. The screen porch was not there at the time, hasn't been there for 20 years, that my client purchased the property in May of 2014. And this is extremely important. There's been no written determination that that screen porch was a legal, non-conforming structure. There's been no proof that there was a request for that to have been made. There's been no proof that it was ever in compliance with the code or approved. And as well, Section 27-298 would apply if it was a legal, non-conforming structure. And that would require that since it's been completely destroyed, it be built in conformance with code. So the law is completely on the side of denying this request. This property is not unique and singular. As I said, a property right next to it shares many of the same characteristics. And these are some other pictures of what we're looking at. The primary structure should end where the brick is. You can see how far it intrudes. This is where the highlighting is at the bottom. That is the property line. And you can again see how close this structure intrudes. This is from my client's seawall, again, right up next to the property. Some folks said that from my client's property, you could not see this existing unpermitted structure. Not true. That's from my client's property. This is the playhouse that's been brought up, which is a standard drive anywhere around Tampa Playhouse. You're going to see them. This is the playhouse's placement, which code has come out and said is in fact compliant where it is in relation to the property line. So we do not have a unique or singular piece of property. We as well do not have a property that was designed at an angle, which was asserted in the variance application. The outside highlighted lines are the north-south property lines of the lot, and the inside highlighted lines are the north-south lines of the actual constructed home. So it's not some weird pie-shaped lot that things had to be jammed into at some odd configuration. It is a lot that in fact, as I believe I mentioned earlier, has the very best view of the canal, looks all the way down the canal to open water. Everybody else is looking across the canal and can see everybody. It's wide open. You're seeing into somebody's backyard when you live on this canal. So nothing unique or singular here. There's also been complaints that privacy has been damaged because my client's property is, and I quote, in such close proximity, but my client's property complies with the side setback. If the theory worked, if the applicant is asserting, then this property at 505 West Davis Boulevard should have a right to a variance 6 feet towards both of these properties. The one that's already constructed is a 2-foot property right next to a 1-story ranch. The one that is under construction, 2-story property right next to a 1-story ranch. This is, in fact, a self-created hardship because the property that was bought was built, the primary structure was built to the setbacks, and no more should be permitted. This is not a reconstructed porch. Again, it's been 100% destroyed. It must be built according to code. There's been no carrying of the burden of proof here, no competent substantial evidence to that effect. My client's home, which is code compliant, did not trigger the need for this unpermitted intrusive structure. Health and safety issues. If you put a roof line 1 foot away, then it's going to be easier access into my client's property. It as well is going to put flammable materials. How much time do I have?
30 seconds if you can, please.
It's going to put flammable materials 1 foot away from my client's wood fence, which is less than 3 feet away from the accessory structure wooden child play area, which then puts it right next to the house. It's going to divert rainwater because, as you can see, it's connected to the entire roof. It's going to decrease the value of my client's property because no way two properties otherwise identical, the one with this intrusion is not worth less. There is a housing stock argument in the application. The house is there now. Grant the variance, deny the variance justifiably, the house is there tomorrow. There is no impact on housing stock here. Again, it has never been considered to be an illegal or an illegal non-conforming structure. There's been no such determination. It's far from harmonious from what should be allowed. And as far as Mr. Ober shielding himself in privacy, that's what his home is for. His home at the setback is within code. It's viable. It provides walls. It provides roof. And a common solution in these kind of situations is to put up a hedge, to put up bamboo, but not to intrude to the detriment of my client. We would therefore ask that it be denied, as the board needs to look at this as new, and I appreciate the time and the additional time.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to talk? Okay, seeing none, I open for questions. Oh, wait, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'd like to say just...
Wait, come up to the podium and state your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
I've been up here before for a previous variance earlier this evening, and this one seems to fall right in line with what was denied just a while back. And I think if the board was to look at one thing, they should look at the word should. Should be and what is. Because as you know, South Tampa tears down ranch-style homes day after day. Here comes domain homes with the same plan, 2-story, you know what I'm talking about, and builds a 2-story house overlooking the ranch house next door. And I'm not here for one side or the other. All I'm here for is to see if the variance board knows what is right and what is wrong, does not enter this, or how good of a fishing partner one has been for 40 years or how good the neighbors are. The whole thing boils down to this. You're obligated by the code and you're set to vote that way. And I'm just trying to open up your eyes to, you can't let feelings enter into your decision. You are bound to do what your code tells you to do. That's what the variance board is all about. And I just hope that you do the right thing. I'd hate to be in your shoes. But
Does that complete your testimony?
weigh this carefully.
Okay.
Because if you allow the board to enter into feelings, you can't do that. I would myself, if I was Mr. Ober, construct going upward. You get rid of the problem. Construct going upward rather than, you cannot go on the 7-foot setback that was put into place by the code to comply with the ordinance of the city of Tampa. That protects your neighbors. If you go on that 7 foot, all you're doing is denying privacy to your adjoining neighbor. We have to respect our neighbors. And imagine what I said earlier. If everyone in the city, block, or county built adjoining on the 7 feet, all you'd have, no access to the back for emergencies. If you had a fire or person in medical need in their backyard, how is the emergency medical team going to enter through there if you set up adjoining property lines and no access? So keep all this in mind when you make your decision. And again, I say you are bound by the code that was put into place, and if you can't vote that way, then we need to look to repeal the code.
Okay, does that conclude your
Thank you very
testimony?
much.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak on this application? All right, seeing none, board, we're open for questions of anybody or staff.
I have a question for the petitioner, please. Can you just clarify a little bit the timeline on this structure again? Did it exist when Mr. Ober bought the property?
Yes, it did. 1988.
On the slab that exists now?
Yes, sir. That's the
Does the roof
this
of
is
the
actually the survey from.
Does the roof of the house cover part of the roof of this structure in question, or is it a separate roof?
It's a separate roof, and there is a soffit on the existing house, and then this was an extension off of that soffit.
I can't tell from the pictures. Is this intended to be, I saw screen, a lot of screen. Is it intended to be a screen room, or is that going to be enclosed with windows?
No, it's intended to be a screen room, and I believe Mr. Ober would even agree to a condition saying that it can only be a screen room as long as it can be enclosed on those two sides adjacent to the neighboring property. I'm going to show you just, this is where this is screen, this is screen, this is just an open door, and then this is screen.
Are those doors?
Just on the far side.
Are those open doors intended to have doors on them at some point?
No.
Okay. All right, that answers my questions.
Anybody else have any other questions? I've got a question for the petitioner's representative?
Me?
No, excuse me, the other attorney, I'm sorry. Long night. There's a photograph in your package that was indicating what I believe to be the actual property line, and you had a photograph with a yellow circle around, I guess, what would have been the corner? Yeah.
Yes, there's actually, I mean, you can barely see it in the photograph, that's why I circled it. There's a
can
very
you-
faint cross right there.
Okay,
That's the
can you draw for me where the actual property, I'm assuming it's moving down that concrete?
Yes, that is, yes. My client's fence that is to the right on that picture is a little bit on his side of the property line.
The fence is on his property.
Yes.
What is the concrete that the fence appears to be sitting on?
That,
Now, not the concrete with the yellow circle, but the concrete above that, past what looks like a piling?
Okay, so the piling is on Mr. Ober's property.
Right. Is that concrete on his property or your client's property?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I can tell that the majority of it is on my client's property.
Yeah, that's the other picture.
And it comes back to the angle, and I have
Well,
another.
wait, time out. I don't want to leave this yet. Ms. Grimes, do you know, is that concrete straddling the property line?
I believe it's immediately interior to their property line.
Okay,
don't
so it's
believe
not
that it's
across,
actually
it's
on the
not
property
across the
line.
property line?
I don't have a survey of his property, so there's no real way for me
For
to
you
tell
to
that.
know. Okay.
And I can add this picture. The concrete that we're looking at bears to the right. The fence that it runs into, I believe, is exactly on the property
Okay,
line.
so it's totally
So,
on your client's property?
I have not looked at a survey of that, but I believe it is.
Okay, all right.
That's really the best I can do with what I've got with me today.
Okay. I don't think I had any other questions. Anybody else?
You can, Mr. Ober would like to respond to one of those questions.
Sure, okay.
If I may, Mark Ober, I've been sworn, Mr. Chairman. You know, this issue, and as Ms. Grimes has stated, I had neighbors that are deceased, one of them, in a house that was like mine. And oddly enough, when this water spout came through, the only thing that it disturbed in the whole neighborhood was my screened-in porch. And I didn't need a barrier because my neighbors and I were dear friends, the previous neighbors. We didn't have any fences. We didn't have a wrought iron fence along the north seawall to Mr. Fry's house. We walked back and forth as neighbors do. They had a tangerine tree, a key lime tree. I took them all kinds of items, and the tail of the tape here was really not the house Mr. Fry's entitled to, his big house. The playhouse. Once I rejected his request to put his boat north and south in that canal, the playhouse was put over on what this two-sided structure tries to block and gives me the privacy that I need. I probably spend more time out there than any of these 5 people and their neighbors in their back house. They've all been to my house. And it's regretful that Mr. Fry, he can do whatever he wants, and he's mad because I wouldn't give him part of my riparian rights to put a dock and a boat lift north and south, which would have almost practically blocked my dock. So I ask you to grant this one request, and I appreciate, I respect greatly what you do and the difficult task that you have. The item, sir, that you and Mr. Chairman were talking about was that piling is a decorative. If you looked in my front yard, I got 2 pelicans and a stone crab trap around a flower bed, and I've got pilings all the way down the west side of my dock and seawall that aren't attached. They're simply pilings that I found floating in the bay when other people made docks, and I put them up, and to me it's aesthetic. So I appreciate your opportunity, my opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you so kindly for your consideration. I don't know if Mr. Chairman, answered your question, actually, but I hope I
Well,
did.
I was curious about where the property line is, because I'm trying to understand the physical, because I haven't been to the site to look.
I get it.
So we have to rely on the testimony. I'm trying to understand what's what, where it sits. So
And the
that particular photo showed what looked like concrete on the neighbor's property, but the fence was offset. I didn't know whose fence was what.
The one thing, if I may, the one last thing that was germane was, and I get kids to do things.
I asked Mr. Fry one time, I had about 8 rocks in my boat, in the bed of my truck, on the seawall, and really this playhouse, kids are kids, I get it. I needed some privacy. So I asked him to have his children refrain from throwing rocks, and they did it one time only. So I'm not here to be the bad guy, but I've been here 31 years, and I appreciate your consideration.
All right, are there any other questions?
Chairman, I've actually got the survey, which may help.
Yeah, if you want to enter that into the record.
I can do that, and we are talking about.
Can you blow that up for us a little bit?
Yeah.
And then slide it down. There you go.
All right, so you can see the fences here, and the fence is inside of the boundary line.
Okay.
And I believe that's fence, and right above it is concrete, and there's nothing showing on the survey on the other side of the shared background.
Okay, all right,
And
thank
I'm
you.
happy to put that in the record if you.
Yeah, would you please?
And that is boundary survey showing final approvals. Pulling out one copy.
No more questions. Applicant, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
I won't need to take that long, but I do want to note for the record that even at this hearing, Mr. Ober didn't object to Mr. Frey's request for more time. He had 60% of the amount of time that we had as the applicant. Just noting that for the record. For some reason, he seems to think that none of the rules apply to him. Everybody else in the audience gets 3 minutes, but somehow he gets double that. He gets 6. And it's just pervasive with him. It's just never enough. And in this situation, my client is doing nothing but trying to protect himself from the home and from the location of the structures on the adjacent property. But this gentleman, who I think was unconnected to the case and spoke, said it shouldn't be about Mr. Ober and what a great guy he is and what a good neighbor he's been, although all of those things are true. What it should be about is the code criteria. And if you look at 27-80, it addresses when a variance can be granted, and it's only authorized if we demonstrate that there is a practical difficulty or an unnecessary hardship, and then also show that the request ensures the health, safety, welfare is protected. To make that determination, you look at the 5 hardship criteria, but we're not required to meet each and every one, although I believe we do, as documented earlier in our testimony. But we do have a hardship, and the hardship is we are adjacent to a structure that towers over the outdoor area of a home that's built at the end of a canal, a unique situation, and they want to take advantage of their outdoor space, and they can't do it because of the home that's constructed next door. So that's the hardship. The 5 variance criteria, I'm not going to go through them again, but this is a unique situation. When you have a split zoning on an irregular 5-sided lot, this was the only way to site the house on the lot, and therefore the only way to site that screen porch. The need for the variance and the hardship was entirely created by Mr. Frey. As I told you earlier, Mr. Ober didn't need a screen porch for the 20 years until Mr. Frey moved next door and built his McMansion. So we also think that the Frey's interests are protected in that their fence is high. It's 6 foot high on top of the block wall, on top of the concrete wall. The proposed accessory structure, the proposed screen porch, is lower than his children's playhouse. He cannot see the top of that roof over top of that fence. It's completely invisible to him as far as it's concerned. There can't be any interference to them. That way, in that regard, this ensures that the public health, safety, and welfare is protected. So we've shown you we've had a hardship. We've shown that we can protect the public health, safety, welfare. Again, the variance will result in substantial justice being done. You're balancing the interests of both parties, and I think that having a screened room that's screened on 2 sides and enclosed on 2 sides kind of balances the interests of both parties. And so with that, we would ask for your approval of this variance request.
Thank you very much. Without objection, I'd like to hear a motion to close the public hearing.
Objection.
Okay. Board discussion and/or a motion.
The very first hardship criteria is whether or not the issue is unique and singular to the property or the building. And I'm looking at the zoning map, which covers, I don't know, roughly a mile radius around this neighborhood. And this property is the definition of unique and singular. I mean, there's not another property that meets the shape, size, location at the end of the canal. Even on the next canal over, the houses aren't situated this way. So, I mean, this is exactly what variances exist for. Now, the question of the structure itself is a different question, and the hardship, I think, could not be more clear. I think the comment about when you upgrade a screen room or whatever, you have to upgrade to current code. That's not my understanding of the building code. My understanding is that if you upgrade 50% of the value of the structure or more, you have to upgrade to current codes. The other thing I'm not aware of, and I don't have any way to get this answer, is if a part of your home is destroyed in a storm, what's the time limit on rebuilding that? I don't know that there is one. I haven't heard either side testify that there is one that says, no, you can't rebuild it 20 years later, so I'll just assume that you can. The slab's still there. The roof may or may not have been there. We've got surveys from more than one from the 90s that this building existed in this exact spot. They're not proposing to build an enclosed structure. It's still a screen room with not even any doors on it. So it's the same intent of what was there before. I think just looking at the building, the shape of the property, what's being proposed, what was there when the property was bought, I don't know if it was code compliant in 1988 or whenever he bought the property. I don't have any way to speak to that. I don't know if there was an approved variance. I don't think that we have records variances back that far or would have been in our report. So I can't make assumptions for what the previous homeowner did. And I see plenty of hardship criteria here. An unenclosed screen structure that was there before, was torn down by a storm. I don't have any reason to oppose this.
I would agree with everything you said. I mean, we've had these cases in the past where we can't hold somebody else accountable for maybe what was done prior to them, and it seems like they're making every effort. They haven't expanded the size. They're still keeping screens, like you said, no doors. They even stated that they're willing to have conditions in there stating that they can't enclose the room. So I too support this.
I think, I can go along with that. I do would like to address the gentleman who brought up the fact that the code is the code. We're supposed to enforce the code. I think that, part of what we're doing here, of course, is to find these exceptions and so forth. And in the cases that came up earlier where you have new construction or you have things which happen that are done by the applicant originally that weren't there, I think that's really another issue. That's another area to explore. I think in this case, I can't help but think about the fact that there was a room similar or pretty much exactly the same as this on this site decades ago, and 20 years ago it was blown away. So I really don't see that there's a huge change going on here, other than the fact that it's just really being restored to its original condition. So under those circumstances, I would support this.
Would someone like to make a motion? Yeah, I mean, let me add that we did hear testimony that they would accept a condition of not enclosing the two sides.
All right.
So it would be a motion with condition, if that's what you're going to make.
All right, that sounds reasonable. Excuse me. All right, I'd like to move that the variance request for case VRB 19-23 for a property located at 4911 West San Rafael Street, as depicted on the site plan presented at the public hearing for a reduction in the side yard setback from 7 feet to 1 feet to keep an unpermitted enclosed back porch, provided that it remains open on two sides with the following, or those were the following conditions. That said, variance as condition be granted based upon the applicant presenting competent and substantial evidence in the record and at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 27-80 of the city code, specifically that I believe in this case it's a uniquely shaped lot and it does place hardships as far as where you can place things and so forth, and so
I'd like to make one amendment to your condition. Maybe we should word it that it not be more enclosed than the plan presented tonight, because I don't want them to hit a snag with the building department trying to guess what 2 sides means. They presented plans for a certain amount of enclosure. Maybe we tie it to the plans presented.
all right, I'd like to amend that to be to the condition being that it be as presented tonight in the presentation and the hearing regarding the 2 sides.
I would add specifically, it's the north face and the west face, not including the angled wall on the west side.
Correct.
All right, I have a motion for approval with conditions by Mr. Villa. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't,
Is that-
can you name those spaces again? Because it would be the,
Well, looking at the site plan, maybe, hang on.
it would be the west and then the angled wall.
Uh,
The angled wall
well,
would be, is enclosed.
The west wall is 2 walls based on your site plan,
Because it's oddly configured.
because it's oddly configured. So I'm assuming that since that would be the 4th
Oh,
wall,
okay, I see what you're saying.
okay? So
May-
it's
is there a
not,
way-
it's not the angled wall, it's the rest of,
as depicted
as depicted on the site plan.
Okay,
Okay,
there is a site plan and it does show, it does have a photo of what's existing,
Yeah.
so that's fine.
okay. I'm sorry. Are we okay, council?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I have a second by Mr. Pasteur. All in favor for approval, say aye. 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 You've been approved by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a little recess for 5 minutes.